Roussel. We're going to explore the poetry of how we live, how we learn, and how we find our way along this strange path we call life. If you are curious about people, their stories, and all things savage and wonderful, join me on the Great Range.
Check, make sure your sound is good. Good?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're okay.
I'm good.
Yep, I can hear everybody.
We're live. The button's on.
Perfect. Right on. So we're back with another episode of the Gray Range podcast with myself, David Roussel, my co-host, Lucas Orich, and our guest today is none other than Lucas's dad, Ken Orich. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, you bet.
Thanks for coming. So you've seen most of them that we've done.
Oh, yeah. I've got, I think, 2 to watch yet.
Okay.
And, yeah, I've got to find the time to do it because they're good lengths. So I get walking in my den or something, and then I turn it on and listen to it and watch it. And
well, that's cool.
They're good.
That's cool.
Yeah, you guys, I like what you guys cover. You kind of sometimes go down the rabbit hole, but that makes it interesting.
Yeah, it's what we call like an open forum podcast. Yeah. So we just kind of get to have those conversations with people and
let it take its course. One rabbit hole I still want to go down though. I mean, so if Crazy Sasquatch Guy, if you're listening and you have the story, we're ready for you.
It's out there. It's out there. Crazy Sasquatch Guy is out there, and eventually we'll get the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it's always interesting to hear different people's perspectives on things.
Yeah.
You know, what they've learned through their own life lessons, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the whole point of this. Like when I sat down to do it originally, there was no, I didn't really know what it was going to be about. I had a few people that said, "Hey, you should have a podcast." And I was like, well, what would it be about? I wasn't sure. And then once I started to think about it, just the idea of being able to let people tell their stories, let people kind of share their life and kind of where they're at and how they got to where they are. Because obviously if we're sitting around talking, we're all still breathing.
That's right.
It probably means we overcame a few things in our lives.
A few obstacles.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of something that resembles wisdom there that's worth capturing for people and passing along. I think so much of our stories now they're not as in depth like humanity. We used to tell stories. We're a very story-driven people. Everything was done by word of mouth. You know, sitting around the campfire, guys would tell stories. And that was how we communicated and how we told lessons to the other generations. And now everything is so visual and everything is kind of almost like fast food.
Well, it's meme culture. It's amazing how you look at, instead of having a big story and it takes a while to get to the point, now you can sum up an entire conflict or an entire world event in a meme.
Yeah, absolutely.
With some humor to it, and people are like,
"Yeah,
okay, I guess that's where we're at."
These quick little sound bites or tiny pieces of information that kind of just everybody, you see it, you get your little hit of dopamine from it, you laugh, and then on to the next thing and the next thing. It's a kind of bite-sized culture, but with these long-form conversations, we get the opportunity to really kind of dig into someone's story or into a particular topic a little bit, and that I think there's some value to that. So,
definitely, yeah.
So thank you guys for coming.
Yeah,
obviously,
for sure, man.
You making the trip to come all this way, and then for coming on to have a chat with us. That's excellent.
Oh, for sure. Like I
cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Yeah, for sure. I told Lucas after I watched a few of them, I said, I'd like to be on the podcast. It just looked interesting, and people have got their own stories and that sort of stuff. Not that I've got a great story or nothing, but when I mentioned it to Lucas the other day, I'd said, maybe you should hear something from a baby boomer.
Yeah,
like a whole generation away from where you guys are at, and things were a lot different back in the days when I was you guys' age and in my 20s and that compared to what you guys have gone through. So.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's, I thought it would be interesting too, because I remember just a few years ago, as an example, the whole climate change, global warming thing, and it was all you could, Al Gore on the news talking about how, and fucking Greta Thunberg talking about how the world's going to explode in a ball of fire. And I just remember we were having a beer around the fire one night or in the backyard, whatever, and you're like, oh, when I was your guys' age, it was the ice age was coming and we were all going to freeze to death. And I just kind of thought it was an interesting comparison. Like, that's what the science and that's what everyone was telling you guys back then. And now here we are.
Yeah, definitely.
One generation later.
Back in the 70s, I used to get a magazine called Alberta Report.
Oh yeah, I remember.
And some different magazines in that too. And it was global cooling. And all the scientific evidence said that we are coming to a new ice age. And that went on for not the whole decade, but a big chunk in the 70s, and
enough to suck up some tax dollars.
Well, yeah, and then I realized there were certainly some things changing, but it was also a business.
Oh, of course.
And when I realized it was a business, I was getting a little bit more skeptical about it. I paid attention about it, but certain things like the fluorocarbons,
the CFCs,
CFCs
I
and
remember
stuff
that.
like that, and they got rid of them.
Yep, the CFCs and PCBs.
So it brought a lot of awareness to a situation.
Yeah, because then, they were worried about the ozone layer and we were all going to fucking burn up, and then acid rain and a lot of that stuff they don't really talk about anymore.
Yeah.
Like, when's the last time somebody talked about the hole in the ozone layer or talked about acid rain being?
Well, I guess if you live in Australia, that's a thing.
It is, yeah.
In New Zealand, the kids at school, if they don't have a cap, a floppy hat, they're not allowed to go out during recess out into the yard. They have a big shade area where they have to stay in the shade area.
Yeah, I could see that.
If they have a hat, they're allowed to go out and play in the playground and that sort of stuff. And certainly, I think it was the Mulroney government back in the whenever he was in, but he did a lot to get rid of acid rain. And acid rain at the time was killing thousands of Ontario lakes, from what I've read and heard.
Yeah.
And when they went into those agreements with the U.S. and that sort of stuff, they cleaned up the acid rain problem.
Yeah.
And those lakes now, a lot of them have come back.
Yeah, I think that was one rare example where we followed the science.
Yeah.
It was actual science. And then it was like, okay, here's the solution. We followed it and ended up with a good product.
That's right. So there was a bit of politics involved as far as getting it done.
Sure.
But they followed.
It's one of the rare times where probably nobody made a massive profit doing it either. They just had to clean up their act.
Oh no, there was money made because those like the acid rain was caused by manufacturing from effluent and from smokestacks.
Right.
So what they started doing is building these huge filters that go inside the stack. These massive filters. I used to deliver them once upon a time. These big, huge, heavy industrial filters. Yeah. And those things will take out everything until basically all that's coming out of that stack is carbon dioxide and water.
Right. The sulfur and that was no longer coming out.
Yeah,
when the sulfur, that was what was causing the acid rain.
It took them a while to get there, but basically the filtration now, is, from what I understand, is so good that they're basically like less than
you can stick your head in the stack.
Less than 1%. Yeah.
But what I mean, there's no profit. I mean, there wouldn't be profit at the level of like the climate emergency now, or it's like a whatever that is. Like there's a lot of money trading hands. It probably wasn't on the same scale back then.
No,
because
like,
we didn't have the same.
It's a global.
It was a global thing. We got to clean up the Great Lakes. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, it's very localized, and those local efforts seem to be successful when they sit down with local communities and stuff like that to clean up a lake or a river.
Plus, think about it. We never had social media back then.
Yeah, there was
that instant connection. Like everything took a while to be informed or hear about it. You'd see it on TV, on the news, and that. But I can't help but think that sometimes maybe social media has driven.
It has, and here's why. It drives the narrative because everyone gets a soapbox now. You don't have to be a professional to stand up and get attention. So everybody wants their little piece of the fucking pie. They're like, oh, look at me, I'm important and I have an opinion. And they're looking for likes and that narcissistic self-gratification. Back then, there's only so many people are going to get up on the soapbox.
Yeah,
so how far is the message going to travel? Like, really, to be on the soapbox, you're probably elected.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's very curated now. Yeah. Like the whole the idea we have with social media, the way that it's used, it's used as mind control. It's used to focus people's attention on certain things. like the psychology that goes into it and the AI that they have now, the way that it tracks how you use it and the way that it directs your attention and what information you get, that's all, none of that's by accident, right?
No, well, is the first part you said, it's like mind control. Or did I just insert that?
No, that's what I said. It 100% is.
Wait, is that my mind being mind controlled? Here's the reality. If you post something on social media, either one of you, how soon after do you go and see if anybody liked it? You don't you don't have to answer the question with a specific time, but don't fucking pretend like you didn't go look and see if it got any attention or else
if anybody saw it. Yeah, that's what you're looking for.
That's the purpose of social media.
You're most definitely guilty. If I post something on Facebook, like I'm a birder and post stuff about birds or nature and all that sort of stuff, I don't go back in that day to see if anybody likes it, but certainly the next morning when I turn on my tablet and I'm going to look at social media, I do wonder how many people have liked it or have made a comment about it and all that sort of stuff, because it is gratifying. And I use social media I never give my opinions or nothing like that, but I use it to share what I'm experiencing when I'm out looking at birds or animals or nature. Yeah. And it's my way of connecting with a lot of my friends and relatives and that sort of stuff.
100%.
But I keep all my thoughts about the world going to hell in a handbasket type of stuff to myself.
Well,
to me, it's
and you know, there's enough of it out there. Yeah. You know, everybody, like you said, everybody has an opinion. But years ago, CBC Radio had a spot, a radio show, I guess, about advertising, and it was really popular. I used to listen to a lot of CBC Radio. I'm kind of a Luddite. So before I met my wife, like, I didn't have television. Yeah. You know, I grew up without television, so I exist pretty good without television. Yeah. But I would listen to a lot of, and I was driving for a living at the time, so kind of satellite radio and all that stuff. I'd listen to a lot of CBC Radio. One of these shows that they had is about advertising, and really interesting stories about kind of how brands got started or this, that, and the other thing. And one of the things that kind of just a fact that got thrown out there that really stuck with me was at one point, and I think it might have been the 80s or the 90s, but there was like 70% of all the money that was being spent into studying psychology was being spent by advertisers.
Yeah, so, actually, and there's still books being written about that. Gad Saad.
100%.
One of kind of Peterson's counterparts.
Yeah.
That's how he kind of got, I think, his first book, not the Parasitic Mind. He has one before that that talks about like psychology and marketing and how that applies, and like consumerism and spending.
And that's what drives the algorithm, right? Yeah. So the algorithm in social media is driven by that psychology that they've studied about how people react to things, about how people look at things, what they like to see, and it just keeps drawing your attention in further and further and further, so they can sell you stuff or change your opinion, right?
Well, they're selling you an idea. So what they've done is they've kind of weaponized, like, I don't know if that's the right word, certainly monetized opinions.
Depending on who's using it, right? But there's definitely entities in the world that are using social media as a weapon, for sure.
They're using the same marketing strategies that they would use to sell you a vacuum cleaner in the 80s. They're using that same marketing strategy now, but I use the term weaponized because it's way more effective. They use social media to sell you an idea or an opinion.
Yeah.
So
you bet.
Definitely. Yeah. You check anything out online, even like you're checking out vacuum cleaners yesterday or today, and you're probably getting all kinds of ads for them. I was checking out those little tables that slide under your sofa, like kind of bend over.
Yep.
And that's all I get now.
Yep.
Ad after ad. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting that feed from Amazon or whatever that, okay, you were looking at this. We got some great deals for you and all that.
I'd actually have to check. I didn't really notice, but I looked at Best Buy and I looked at Costco. So I only looked at two places. I didn't Google, like, what's the best vacuum cleaner in this category. So if I did that, holy shit.
But it depends also on your web browser. Like,
actually, my phone is in the Netherlands also. So I don't get the same ads as everybody else.
Okay. Yeah, so if you're using a VPN,
my phone's on a VPN 100% of the time. So it doesn't. My phone's not in Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, it is physically, but
yeah, I used to get a lot of ads from Japan.
Yeah.
But had it set to Japan for a long time. So Ken, where did you grow up? Where are you from?
Okay, I was born and raised in Lethbridge, Back
Okay.
then the population was around probably 30,000, 35,000. So born and raised there.
And how far is that from the border, Lethbridge, Southern
About
Alberta?
an hour drive to Montana.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah.
100 clicks.
Yeah.
And had 4 brothers. I have 4 brothers.
Okay.
And so we were all boys in the family and all that. And we had a lot of freedom. Like when I was 10 years old, I was roaming the coulees with my 22, shooting everything that moved or whatever, and snaring rabbits and that. 'Cause the Old Man River flows right through Lethbridge, so there's big coulees and one of the largest continuous cottonwood forests in North America there. So there was lots of variety there. So I spent a lot of time out in nature and that. And when we were 10, well, maybe 12 years old, me and my brother would hitchhike to Waterton for the weekend and camp and that sort of stuff. And and so we had lots of freedom, and part of that freedom, responsibility came with it. Like,
of course,
we could do all kinds of things, but God help us if we got in trouble, like disrespected somebody or had a complaint against us or whatever. We got a whooping, and it was it was a whooping. So we learned respect for others. And we learned real quick what our, I guess, range was.
Yeah, you had boundaries, right?
Yeah, what our boundaries were and all that sort of stuff. So that was a good way to grow up. Plus, my dad was from the farm. My grandmother had a farm at Brockett, which is about an hour west of Lethbridge. And on weekends and summers, we'd go to the farm. And as kids, we were allowed to run wild there, you know. Like, again, shooting magpies and crows and gophers and berry picking till we shit our pants type of stuff. And learning how to drive a vehicle on the farm fields. And my uncles, a lot of them had backgrounds in the rodeo and all that. So branding time, they'd save a couple of the bigger calves, and we'd have a rodeo. We'd have to ride these calves and that sort of stuff. And you know, so it was a good time. And you learned about life as far as like. My baba would kill a bunch of chickens, and we'd watch her whack their heads off, and we'd chase after them. They were running all over, blood spurting out of their heads and that. And, or you'd watch them kill a hog and butcher it and stuff. So we had a real sense of reality from that point of view. We knew where our food come from. We knew about life. We saw calves being born and stuff like that. So you learned a lot during your impressionable years. Which was good. And then I always had an interest in. I was an avid reader, and I always had an interest in forest rangers, because they would save Bambi and all that sort of stuff. And so I had that idea of what a forest ranger was. Right. So when I was, I graduated in 1967. But I got mad in the class and I quit early, and so I had to. Had to go back for some more credits.
Fuck, I come by it honest. Now the story comes out. Okay. So I'm the guy who went to career and life management 3 times.
I think you're in pretty good company there. I don't think any of us had the traditional graceful exit from
So anyhow,
secondary.
I second year of school, I only had a couple classes, and it's sort of like trigonometry, which was really important later in life. But I got a job. Well, I started working jobs when I was 16, like construction, but I got a job with, at the time it was Lethbridge Bottling, 7-Up. RC Cola, Orange Crush.
Back when they do the old glass bottles, they'd reuse them and stuff like that.
My job was I was loading trucks, like load the load for the truck for the next day and all that, and learn how to drive a forklift and all that sort of stuff. And then they had a semi-trailer, and the guy who was driving it was moving on. He says, Ken would be a good guy for it. So they taught me, and I drove semi. And part of the driving test was parallel parking a semi. The physical test. But I drove that for about a year, making runs to Lethbridge Bottling had bought out Scona Beverages in Medicine Hat, and I'm not sure what the beverage company was in Swift Current. So we had warehouses there, so I would haul the bottle package to these warehouses, and then the drivers there would do the local sales and that. Now, I had applied at NAIT to become a forest ranger, like to take the forest technology course. And it was late August, I got a call from this, are you coming or what? I said, what? They said, well, you've been accepted into the program. Are you coming? You got to start, I think this was a Thursday. You got to start Monday if you're coming. Yeah, but I never got it in the mail. It got lost somewhere along the line. So anyhow, I quit my job and headed up to
a quick turnaround.
Headed up to Edmonton, big city, clueless as shit type of stuff. No place to stay, so I went. Had a list at the school of people who were like a boarder.
Oh yeah, looking for a roommate.
Your own bedroom and that, but they would feed you and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I got that and found one, and I was staying there for a while. And there's nothing a small city kid or in a big city, and you're looking out the window, and back then it was probably 200,000 people out there, and not a person gives a shit that you're alive. That was really, it was really an eye opener.
Yeah,
kind of really lonely, really hard. And how some of the school buddies and that. In a couple of months, we got an apartment together, and then life was good after that. Because you had friends. Yeah. But forest technology is not fish and wildlife. It's not saving Bambi.
No.
It's forestry. It's forest management, land management.
So what does that look like? Like what does the schooling for that look like? Like what are you learning in that course?
Or more accurately, what did it look like in 1969?
69, 70. Yes. I graduated in 71. So it's a 2-year program. Surveying.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Forest management, like inventory, cruising timber, learning how to estimate volumes of timber and all that.
Okay.
A lot of trigonometry, mathematics, public speaking.
Okay.
We even took typing.
Yeah.
I would guess they saw the future.
Reports, yeah.
Yeah, well, I saw that they must have saw the future. The computers were going to come.
Yeah.
Today I can still do 60 words a minute.
There you go.
But so now it was all related to land management.
Okay.
So the first year was at Edmonton.
When you say land management, though, like you mean with respect to, being a steward of the resources for the province and how that interfaces with logging? Is that is that the primary customer? Like when you're like you're, or maybe not just logging, but oil and gas, like interfacing with industry?
Right. The components that like government had input, industry, the forest industry had input. Any of the type of places you go, they had people for that program on their board of directors. I guess it would determine, what like places like SAIT and NAIT, they're there to get you jobs.
Right.
So the curriculum is very driven by the people who are hiring.
Yeah, so the industry itself.
Industry itself. So so the first year was in Edmonton, and we took a whole bunch of different things. The second year was actually in Hinton.
Okay.
At the Forest Technology School.
Sure. Yeah.
And there they have the Cache-Picot Forest where you can learn forest management practices and like part of it is like oil and gas exploration. Well, there's seismic lines. There's in the logging industry roads to build. So you learn all that type of stuff to be of value in anything industry related with dealing with the forest, I guess.
Right. So and you guys are dealing with like pretty much just the botanical end of it. Like you got geologists that were dealing with the soil end of it.
Well, we took soils. We had to know soils.
Okay.
We had to recognize erodible soils and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I sucked at that. I hated that program. But so a really broad amount of it. Now, I'd made up my mind. There was no way I was working for the Alberta government for the Forest Service, and I was not going to Footner Lake, which is way up north of high level.
Okay.
12 clicks north of high level. And I was not going to cruise timber.
Right.
I was not doing none of that. Anyhow, we were applying for jobs in our second year, and I'd sent off a letter and I applied for the assistant forest ecologist in the Tanganyika forest in Kenya, or Tanganyika. And the Serengeti forest in Tanganyika.
Sure, okay.
And I'd filled out the application on the stamp there and all. I addressed it. I just put a bunch of stamps.
Yeah.
Thinking it would go airmail. Well, back in the day, you had to have airmail stamps, or you had to at least have a sticker saying airmail.
Oh, yeah.
So I put all these stamps there, mailed it away. Never heard nothing. So I thought, okay, I got to get a job. I'm graduating. So people...
Hold on.
What?
So you fucking rolled the dice. You're like, I'm going to mail out one application to be a ranger in the Serengeti, and fuck, that should hold me.
Yeah.
And then wait until the last minute.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I better get my life together.
Basically.
That sounds like the kind of planning I do.
Yeah. So anyhow, people graduates were responding back that they're working for a logging company, building roads or laying out cut blocks and all that. And I thought, man, is that ever boring? I hated all that shit, eh?
Yeah.
And there was no Bambi savings. So, but the guys working for the Forest Service, back then it was the Alberta Forest Service, provincial government, they were telling me they were on fires and they were doing this and that, just a really variety of work what they're involved in. So that got me excited. And I thought, okay, I'm going to apply to government because it looks like a real exciting job. And so I did. And I ended up being a cruiser in Footner Lake for the Forest Service. That was my first job out of the, so never say never.
Yeah.
And I quite liked it. Yeah, I cruised timber. It was, you're out in the bush every day, doing timber inventory and all that. And we had our run-ins with black bears and buffalo and,
of course,
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And scare the shit out of you, adrenaline's so pumping, just terrifying sometimes.
Yeah.
And the mosquitoes, the black flies.
Oh, yeah.
That sort of stuff.
I'm familiar. I've worked up there.
Yeah. One time I got stung by yellow jackets probably 100 times. I ended up in the Fort Vermilion Hospital for 3 days. They thought I was going to die.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Really?
Back then it was a ferry to get across to they didn't have a winter road, no bridge, so it was a ferry.
Right.
Got on the ferry, got across there. The old
I've
doc,
taken that ferry, I'm pretty sure.
The old doc looked at me and he checked me over and he says, well, I'm putting you in the hospital. I said, why? He said, I think you're going to die.
Oh, geez.
So that's pretty terrifying.
Thanks, Doc.
Wow.
You're 21 years old. I mean, my face was ballooned up. My lip was up.
So you had a reaction to the venom.
Oh, yeah. You could see every hair on my mustache. My eyes were swollen shut.
Geez.
My throat was all red and scratchy.
Yeah.
And kind of.
They didn't have the antihistamines and the EpiPens that they have now, right?
No. So that was exciting. Anyhow.
Wow.
I quite enjoyed the job, and then at the end of the season, they offered me a position to be the party chief or assistant party chief in Whitecourt.
Okay.
So before we get there, so do you have any? I remember some stories as a kid, but do you have any memorable bear encounters that, or was that later?
At that time, they weren't really memorable. You'd be parting the willows of the thick alder, and you'd looking at a bear, and thank God he would turn around. But I had bought from my boss at the time a single-barreled bolt-action 12-gauge shotgun, and I sawed the barrel off. So I had a sawed-off shotgun I carried with me.
Yeah.
And I always had it loaded for a bear encounter. And the couple times I parted the willows and there's a bear looking me right in the face, like from here to the computer there.
Yeah.
By the time I could get my shotgun up, the bear, woof, and they were turning, running, gone. Eh?
Yeah. Well, that's what you want.
Yeah, that's what you want. I must say I never did crap myself, but it was close. But so back in those early days, just buffalo the same way. We would come across buffalo out near the Wenzel River, north of John Doerr Prairie.
Yeah.
And on that road that goes into, I can't think of the name of the place now. It's on the west side of Wood Buffalo Park. Anyhow, we'd run into buffalo, and they were terrifying. We were more scared of buffalo than black bears.
Because is that all
They're
like
mean.
Repopulated?
Well, they stray out of the park.
That's all wood buffalo. That's all natural.
Yeah, but were they always there? Because in history they talk about they killed all the buffalo at one point.
Well,
because I know that there are
the
populations.
Plains bison, but wood buffalo, I think
they were there. I think they were there.
I'm pretty sure those are natural.
And they would roam way out and that sort of stuff. And lots of times we'd be driving to where our day of work was, and we'd come across one of the locals that killed a buffalo, and they were dressing it out.
Yeah.
Take it home, eh? So anyhow, I got a job in Whitecourt where I was the assistant party chief, and that was good. I was still working. That was the important thing. And we had quite the crew back then. Half of them were dope smokers, like pot.
Well, I can imagine in the late 60s, early 70s, there's a certain group of people that are going to gravitate to working outside in the trees. I know the tree planting industry tends to attract a lot of that type of person.
Colorful person.
So the bunkhouse, half my crew were smoked marijuana, and like I smoked at the time, roll your owns.
Oh yeah.
So they'd be in the bunkhouse trying to roll their cigarette or their joints, and they would just piss me off because they were so shitty at it, eh? So I'd say, give me that goddamn stuff here, and I'd roll them up their joints for them and all that sort of stuff, and I'd say, you're not smoking them here.
Yep.
Bunkhouse, because I was in charge of the bunkhouse.
Yep.
and you're not smoking them at work when
Yep.
we're out in the field. But other than that, at least have a decent joint. Don't have that shit that's falling apart on you all the time. So
Kids.
Fucking kids.
So
Yeah.
so they were my same age. Some were a little bit younger, and some were older. But I learned a lesson in management. There was I could be their friend, but I had to show them that I could go drink beer with you and all that. But when it came time to the boss, I was the boss. And the incident that I remember about that, we were moving out to a camp and getting it set up, and I was giving the guys orders. Okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and you go dig the shit house, the shitter.
Yep.
And the guy says, why do I always have to dig the shitter? And he was complaining that why was I giving all the orders and telling him what to do? And I said, well, look, if you want to take over, you go ahead and do it. Oh, he says, okay. I says, what do you want me to do? He says, dig the shithole. I took the shovel and I walked over and started digging it. And I saw, I was keeping an eye on what was going on. And it was chaos.
Yep.
And it took him about 15 or 20 minutes. He come over and he said, give me the shovel. He dug the hole and
He learned his lesson.
Yeah, I got the camp organized, and he suddenly realized, and the whole crew realized, that's why I was the boss.
Yeah.
That I knew what was going on, and I was organized and had experience and stuff like that. So after that, it was no problem with them, no matter what. I'd give them an order, they'd do it.
Yeah.
That was good. But I kept on applying for ranger positions because I wanted a ranger. I wanted to be permanent.
So what's the difference?
Well, I was a timber cruiser. Right? Our job was to cruise timber, go assess the amount of board feet in a stand of timber.
So you basically go out to a plot, you measure it out, tell them what's there.
Yeah. We like the way the cruise would set up, like we'd have to do say a 10% cruise or whatever the percentage was. So we'd figure out, and then we'd set up our distances between the plots, and the plots was a tenth of an acre based on a prism.
Okay.
That you would look around. So we'd say every 10 chains we'd have to put a plot in, and that 10 chains is 660 feet.
Yeah. I used to be a chainman once upon a time surveying.
So so we would set up and we'd have it laid out like all the timber types on the maps, and we would have to make sure that we had to hit these timber types.
Okay.
But in the cruising, if you went 10 chains and you were in the timber type but happened to be in a clearing, a little muskeg clearing, it was no tally.
Okay.
It was still valid because it was in the timber type. So, and then based on that, the amount of volume, like the tree diameters measured and the height of the trees.
Yeah.
There's calculations and all that, compilations to determine the volume of the.
So how do they figure out how big a cut block's going to be?
That's up to the forest management plans are approved by forestry.
Right.
But they would lay it out, and back in those days, they thought the state of the art was like kind of a checkerboard pattern where a cut block would be like a checkerboard.
Yeah.
So there'd be it would be 10 chains wide by 40 chains long, and then off one corner would be the next one going up, and then it would be like a checkerboard.
Yeah. I see what you mean.
And they would clear cut that. Over the years, the science has got way better and all that. And don't forget, back in the time, that was state of the art.
Yeah.
Then things got better. Naturally, they started doing type cuts or kind of more to replicate fire and landscape logging, so you don't have those big scars of straight lines on the landscape and stuff like that.
Yeah. My dad logged through the kind of late 60s, early 70s. That was he did a lot of the like mountainsides and stuff like that in BC. Yeah. But he'd always just my childhood was just one long drive down forestry roads because that's what he liked to do. He liked to be in the bush, and when he wasn't working, he'd load up the family, and we would be driving into the middle of nowhere on these forestry roads into these big cut blocks and picking blueberries or hunting in the fall or whatever, right? So, interesting.
Like I said, I wanted to be a ranger, so I was applying to be a forest ranger. Like a forest officer, you're dealing with more than timber. You're dealing with whatever happened on the land. So, back in those days, the Crown land in Alberta covered about 70% of Alberta, which was, I'll call it Crown land because that's what it is. Yeah. And the Forest Service managed 90% of that 70%.
Oh, wow.
So we had a huge thing. And we managed everything that went on it, whether it be oil and gas exploration, seismic, sand and gravel extraction, grazing, logging, you name it, fire. The Forestry was responsible for managing that and doing inspections and that sort of stuff. So I wanted to be a ranger because I liked the idea of the variety.
Yeah.
So I was applying to all these ranger positions, and finally I got a forest officer one position in Red Earth Creek.
Oh my goodness.
And back then, I tell you, Red Earth Creek was in the middle of nowhere.
It's still in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, but there was no paved highways. You had to go through oil field roads.
Yeah.
And yet it'd be easy to get lost if you weren't familiar with it in the middle of the night. And if it rained, instead of it being a 2.5 hour trip out, it could be sometimes 5 hours to get in or out. And there's times I chased ducks off the road with driving along. But so Red Earth at the time, Union Oil had a camp. I think there was three or four families at the camp. Waddell Construction had an open camp where they and then Forestry had a trailer, shared accommodation. I had to be single. That's why I got it, because the other guy there was also single. So we shared a trailer.
Yep.
And we had a forestry radio.
Okay.
But there was no, the only phone was, the Red Earth Trading Post. They had 3 families there, and they had a mobile phone that you could use for a call.
Like an old XJ.
Yeah.
Not a cell phone.
We're talking
XJ,
just
So you'd have to wind up
right back.
And so you can make a call there, and Union Oil had one too. But it was for their purposes.
Yeah.
So, no TV. I think once in a while you could intermittently get a piece of a radio station. So there was nothing. And that was another great lesson in life was after a couple years in Red Earth, I'd never be bored a day in my life. Ever.
I'd figure. Yeah.
And I picked up a lot of nickel knowledge because you read everything you can get. I'd get a magazine, I read every ad, everything about it, which was really good for Trivial Pursuit sometimes because so they'd say something else, they make nickel there, don't they?
Yeah, a lot of Reader's Digest. And
I don't know how.
Whatever was, because magazines are big at the time, right? That's kind of where you get everybody's getting their information.
And that, and it was, you make friends in the North, you never lose, because you rely on each other.
Yeah.
And that. So Red Earth was great. And then my parents died in 1973. So I'd only been in as a ranger for a year and a half.
Well, so you did get on as a ranger.
Oh, yeah.
And is that like a contract with the government then?
No, a permanent employee.
Okay.
Yeah, as a ranger, yeah. And so I was doing all those things like fire, land use inspections, oil and gas, well inspections, sand and gravel.
Was it what you thought it would be? As far as like the variety and what everyone was talking about, the way that it hyped up, or you're like,
it was based on what the feedback was. It was never saving Bambi, which
but your impression of like when you were cruising timber and everyone else was saying, forestry, the government's good job because they got to do all this stuff. Did the variety live up to your expectation?
Definitely, I love the variety. So that was great. But then when my parents died, I had a 12-year-old brother at the time, and I had to make a decision. What do I do? Do I go home and help raise my brother, or do I stay? And I struggled with that for about 3 months, and finally I made the decision to go home. So I quit the Forest Service, and I went home, and I had enough money saved up to live for a year without working. So that was my plan. But I got down there in time before Christmas, and Pepsi found out I was back in town, because by then my brothers were working for Pepsi.
Okay.
And they asked if I'd come in and work and deliver loads, because Christmas time is busy time for the soft drink industry.
I guess,
So I said, all my friends are working, sure, make some extra money. So I did that, and they offered me a full-time job. I got thinking, all my friends that I want to hang out with are working, so they're not going to want to go drinking every night, and during the daytime, what the hell am I going to do? So I took a full-time job and worked for Pepsi, and that by then, all my brothers were working there. I had started off in the soft drink industry, and my brother under me, I had got him a job back then in the 7-Up days. And then when Pepsi bought them out, so that's how it went. But they were all working for the soft drink industry. So at one time, the whole Orich clan were working for the Pepsi.
We're for PepsiCo.
Yeah. And they didn't like funerals or weddings because they would have a hard time finding
lose half their staff that day.
Yeah. So anyhow, worked there, and then one day Pepsi pissed me off and I exploded. And by then my brother had moved. My younger brother had moved over to Coca-Cola, and when when I lost my cool, by then I was married.
Mm.
And I thought, I just went berserk.
When did you get married?
1975.
When did you meet? How'd you run into the love of your life there?
She was a barmaid.
There you go.
And I was a drinker.
Match made in heaven.
Classic tale as old as time.
I was a drinker.
Tale as old as time. Yeah.
So anyhow, I went to Coke, and Coke was really good. They were
hold on. Why did you lose your shit? What was the blow up about?
I was taking a load of to Waterton Park, National Park, for their spring opening.
Okay.
And it was wet and sloppy out, and I was getting hassled about tarping my load. And I said, "Look, I know what I'm doing."
Mm-hmm.
And the manager at the time was just hacking on me, and I just lost it.
I wasn't going to take his shit.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So I just blew up, and I quit on the spot and went to Coke. I phoned my brother Barry, and I says, "Hey, does Coke need any drivers? I'm desperate, eh?" He said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do." So I went to Coke, and so at the time I was small, skinny guys like Lucas, and they were good at the job because like the big guys never lasted. They couldn't take it. But so I went to Coke, and within less than a month, I had some of the prime roots.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And making good money.
Yeah.
And actually, but then some friends, by then we had Zachary, and then friends came to visit me from my forestry school days, and they were working for the Forest Service. They come to visit us, and they were talking about it, and I started to miss it. And I thought, a career with Coca-Cola, I couldn't see it. Because I was a driver at the time. I couldn't see beyond where you could go.
Yeah.
My other brothers made careers of it and into management and all that, and they were very successful at it. They had made lifelong careers out of it.
Sure. Yeah.
So I applied to go back to forestry, and they said, "Why should we hire you?" And I said, "Because I've got 2 years of experience,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't need to train me. You hire somebody new, you got to train them, and they don't have the experience."
Right.
And I said, my preference would be back to the Slave Lake Forest. And I got hired back to Slave Lake.
There you go.
So we spent a couple months in Slave Lake, and then Red Earth come open again. So I thought, I'll go back to Red Earth because I know the lay of the land.
Sure.
So back then, they didn't have, you had to be single for accommodation. So I had to rent a trailer. Anyhow, when my wife, I can't remember if that's the first time she ever saw Red Earth, or it might have been the year before where I took up for a party. Anyhow, the first time she saw Red Earth, she burst into tears.
Yeah.
It was quite a culture shock. Her
Yeah.
being originally from Calgary.
Yeah. There's nothing up there, man.
Right. And there was nothing, but she ended up liking it, and we liked it. And then Lucas was born in 1977 in Slave Lake.
Yeah. Okay.
And I tell you, when we'd be making the trip back and forth, those washerboard roads and all that,
Mm-hmm.
it was amazing that Annette never delivered early. She might have a bit early, but pounding over those roads.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
So we spent a few more years, or I think I spent a total of, 1976. 76, maybe 77. An opportunity came up to transfer to Nordegg.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So we transferred to Nordegg, and that was sweet going from Red Earth to Nordegg.
Yeah. It's moved back to civilization.
Yeah. I mean, we're still an hour out of Rocky Mountain House, and Nordegg was, I mean, it was small. They had the store at the motel, the jail, a post office, and a school.
More than they got in Red Earth, though.
Yeah, and the ranger stations, the ranger station. So we spent time there. Our youngest son was born in Calgary, but from Nordegg. These guys went to the last one-room schoolhouse
Oh,
in
yeah.
Alberta.
Yeah. The
Wow.
last one roomer in Alberta. Each row was a grade. We had it was grades 1 to 6. So, you'd have the rows, and each row was like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5.
Yeah,
grade
because
6.
that whole area, I'd imagine, especially back then, that's all agricultural. Like there's people, a lot of people raising cattle over there.
No, it was all forest reserve. It was all some timber operation,
okay.
tourism,
Yeah,
and
tourism.
hunting and fishing.
Yeah. Okay.
That sort of
Okay.
stuff. Yeah, no, there was, and lots of campgrounds.
Okay.
And like originally when campgrounds got started, it was because of the Forest Service.
Yeah.
And it was a fire prevention tool. if they would make these, like they found, where people were always camping and all that, and there was a garbage issue and that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
if we build campgrounds where these people are, we'll know where they're at for a fire, from a fire perspective and fire prevention. So that's how these campgrounds kind of got started. And Nordic at the time had 22 recreation areas before parks took them over. Like the whole time I was there. And that was a big part of our workload was our recreation areas. We had we hired forest guardians in the summer to patrol them, and the duty officer on a regular basis. When I was duty officer, I patrol these campgrounds too, and you run into some interesting stuff. Like the people I deal with were drunks or drugged out or whatever.
Yeah.
You only got to meet the assholes. You hardly ever got to meet.
Of course.
And on a long weekend, like a long weekend in May, there would be 10 or 15,000 people in the area, and the 200 or 300 you dealt with were all assholes.
Yeah.
Primarily, mostly.
Yeah.
But we had a really good working relationship with the RCMP, and they actually had, some of their cruisers had forestry radios installed in them.
Okay.
And so they would call and say, hey, we're coming out. We'll do some patrols through the campground. And they'd come in out early.
Yeah.
And they would cruise to the campgrounds nice and slow to let people know the RCMP were in the area. But then they'd head back to Rocky Mountains. But we knew that they had been in the area, so if we had a problem, say, okay, we can call the RCMP, and the people would usually smarten up. But to show you how serious it can be on a long weekend, one time the RCMP come and asked, can we use your office to do breathalyzer tests?
Okay.
And we said, yes, by all means. So that was on the Friday night, Friday afternoon. And so we give them the key, got them all set up. About an hour and a half later, there was a knock at the door. Here's your keys. You guys done already? Oh, yeah, they said just whatever we stopped was impaired. We're taking these guys to jail, and we're going to set up in Rocky Mountain House. That's how quickly.
Yeah.
So, and I made it a point on long weekends, our family never traveled anywhere because we'd be going against the traffic and knowing how many impaired drivers there were on the road.
Yeah, that was a real problem in the 70s.
Well, yeah, and we reacted because everything was an hour away.
Yeah.
Like we got involved in a lot of the accidents,
Right.
And so some of our forest officers were pretty good EMT types.
Yeah.
And they would deal with the blood and the guts, and I'd deal with some of the other stuff. But the jail had an ambulance, but it was basically a scoop and run operation.
Yeah.
And then you're waiting for the police to come, and then I had two cases where people coming to my door shot.
Oh, jeez.
And one was a guy come to my door, and he's just covered in blood. And he said, I need help. My friend's been shot.
Yeah.
So I say, well, you got to clean yourself up. I said, I can't let my kids see you like this. So I got him the garden hose outside, and I went and looked at the guy in the back of his vehicle who'd been shot through the head. And I didn't want to move him.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid I'd dislocate a clot or something and kill the guy. And so I called the ambulance from the jail, and I told the guy, I said, it's going to seem like hours. But I said, they'll be here in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So they come and they scooped him up and raced him off to Rocky Mountain House. And then I phoned the RCMP and said, there's a gunshot guy coming, he shot in the head.
Yeah.
And because naturally they've got to do something about it, eh?
Right.
So they did. I talked to them later, and they said the guy come within a millimeter of blowing his brains out. And the guys had been shooting on the power line with their pistols, and the guy, his cocked gun, went to just his earmuffs.
Oh, jeez.
The gun went off, and it hit him in the temple.
Yeah.
And ricocheted, but I mean a lot of blood, eh?
Oh, yeah.
And so they charged the guy.
Yeah.
So they charged him. They said, that happens once in a while at the gun range in Regina.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Those four firearms rules.
I don't want to derail the entire. I have a million stupid fucking gun stories because I'm in the industry.
Yeah.
So now and then but actually, it might have been the same year, or maybe it was next year. A guy come to my door, and our friend's been shot. And he had about a 5-pound rump roast taken out of the cheek of his ass.
Oh, jeez.
But they had been hunting, and they'd stopped and seen a deer on a cut line,
Yeah.
or a power line, and they jumped out. And when one of the guys was loading his gun or whatever, it went off and hit the guy in the ass.
Of course.
So I said, back then you kids are all in diapers. So or some of them, I had clean flannel diapers. I said, here, you can stick that, hold it against your rear end.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, actually, this helicopter right now just landing, they can take you to the hospital, but you'll have to pay for it.
Yeah.
He said, what would that cost? I don't know, a couple of $1,000 maybe. And, oh, no. He says, I'll just go in with my buddies.
Yeah.
So he's slapped the towel to his ass, and they got in the vehicle and drove away. And I phoned the police again and said, "You got a gun."
So another one coming. Yeah.
Yeah. So, while I was at Nord, I got promoted to be the Forest Officer 3, which is the second in charge
Okay.
of the district, and it was beautiful country. Like our western boundary was Banff National Park and Jasper National Park.
Yeah.
And I got paid to do fire patrols over that beautiful, spectacular scene.
Yeah, no
on
kidding.
a regular basis. I was getting paid for that.
Yeah, that's all right.
So part of that job was, again, the timber management, the inspections, the oil and gas exploration.
Mm-hmm.
It was a busy time because the provincial government had incentives for that pinnacle drilling, that deep hole drilling.
Yeah.
They're drilling down 20,000 feet. And they're looking for pinnacle reefs that, the reefs like that, and they got to go right in the top of the reef. If they hit the side of it,
They don't get it.
they don't get it.
Yeah.
They have to go right to the top. And that's where that 3D seismic and that really started to develop.
Okay.
For the precision and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So we had at one time we had 10 or 12 deep hole rigs drilling, and they'd be on those sites for sometimes a year and a half, 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
It would take them sometimes 24 hours or more to change a drill bit.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess tripping out all that pipe would take a long time.
And that pipe would stretch,
Yeah.
That pipe would stretch, and big sumps they needed and stuff like that. And so that was certainly interesting times that, in that. And then right about then, the National Energy Policy, the first Trudeau, put that in thing.
Yeah.
Which gutted Alberta.
Of course.
And we lost forestry. They couldn't see what was going on, like a lot of guys. So we lost about a third of our staff. And a lot of those staff, some went that were kind of middle, but most of them were the younger guys, the 1 to 15-year guys.
Okay.
And I stayed because I already had an investment in my pension. I only had about 12 years in, but I stayed. But a lot of guys left. So what happened, the further down the road of that, the repercussion was when it came time for promotions and all that, we were missing a core third.
Yeah, you're missing a chunk of your people.
Yeah. The ones you should have been mentoring.
Yeah.
And that. So it's hard to mentor somebody when you're all in the 20-year range and then you got a whole bunch of guys in their first year.
Yeah.
Like where are the 8-year guys, the 10-year guys to take over?
Well, and that's something that our generation right now, that Generation X is facing as the 40-year-olds in the industry, 40s to late 40s kind of thing. We're missing a big chunk of people. There's about a 20-year space for the next guys coming up.
And
so,
where does the industry go? Like when you don't have the proper people to be mentored and trained, what you end up with is a good chance for a lot of incompetency. Decisions being made not based on experience, based on...
we see that all over. I mean, there's a big, we call it brain drain in the in most industries right now. You got the one generation retiring.
Yeah.
And there's really nobody filling those gaps because a lot of these industries, I mean, if we look at, we're in 2024 now, we start looking back to say 1980. A lot of these industries have been built since 1980. So the people who are retiring know everything. They know how it was started. They know, they have the history of it, and none of that was recorded. Very little of it.
No.
So you can go to school and you can get a degree in whatever and come out, but and technically you can replace this person, but you do not have that 30, 40 years of working knowledge of, well, this is how it's supposed to operate, but here's how it actually operates and has operated for decades. And we're running into that all over the place now where we're having to Band-Aid things because, like you said, it's accidental incompetence.
Yeah.
Because people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
But things get expensive really quick because people they're relying either on their schooling or they're relying on technology now a lot more. And all those things fail in practice when we get into the field. We start doing stuff.
Well, and one thing, even when I was in trades, that we noticed too, is you would take your kids who are country kids, your country boy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to fucking worry about that guy because he's problem solved before. He grew up on a farm, or he grew up on an acreage, or he spent a lot of time in the woods. There's a difference between getting that guy as an apprentice or getting the city kid who has never did any of that.
Yep.
Right. Like one guy can be out in the field and you can just set him with a truck and he's going to be fine because he'll just figure it out. The other guy, well, without direct supervision, you're not going to get the same result.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
So anyhow, that's what happened in the 80s. In 1986, the mountains are beautiful. We lived there in Nordegg for 8 years.
Yeah,
the kids were all went to their one-room schoolhouse and all that, and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
But after all, you take it for granted. But mountain weather is also kind of crappy. In the evenings, you always had to put a sweater on most evenings.
Oh, yeah.
Early sunsets because the mountains are close.
Yeah, I grew up in Jasper, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
And but there wasn't much in the way of bugs. So that was an upside. Yeah. And anyhow, in 1986, the first day of summer, wake up, 2 inches of snow on the ground. First day of summer. Yeah. So that was typical mountains. Anyhow, in July of 1986, I had got promoted to, actually the superintendent come to me and said, there's a position in high level, apply on it. And I did because I'd really pissed him off and he was giving me a direct message. There's no room for you in this forest anymore.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so I applied on it and I got it. It was a forest protection tech, and that's going into the strictly fire business.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Strictly fire.
Yeah, yeah.
And so for the next 10 years in high level, I was a fire guy. Every second week as a duty officer, which you look after all the fire operations that are going on. You make the decisions on priorities and make sure the resources get sent to where you want them to go and that sort of stuff. And basically oversee the whole operation. Now, Footner Lake Forest at the time was probably about the size of New Brunswick. So a big chunk of real estate to look after. So you're dealing with, we had 3 districts and high level, or Footner Lake was a big fire district.
Yeah.
You get lightning storms go through there, and sometimes you get 30 or 40 starts.
Oh, wow.
Fire. So as a fire guy, I loved that. It was fantastic. The kids did most of their schooling in high level. Through the last part of grade school and all through high school and that. So they made lots of friends up there and all that. And we lived out at Footner Lake, which was where the airport was, and Forestry had a complex there of 8 or 10 houses, and it was good. The kids, I'm still good here. The kids had a great time growing up in that environment. Again, they did their thing, right from snowmobiling to canoeing to fishing to whatever.
Yep.
And even things like my boss, he would we had kind of reverse crescent, like the houses were all in the middle and the loop road right.
Oh, okay.
So he would do a patrol in the spring because these guys would be out making tree forts and all, and they'd get hold of those old orange plastic tents that we used to use to help build their 4-day.
Okay.
And when the boss would drive around, if he could see any sign of their tree fort, they'd take it down and put it further into the woods. So I don't know how many times you guys got caught for that, but
oh yeah,
our final location was pretty good. We had a double-decker tree fort.
Parks Canada used to come take ours down all the time.
Stole every fence board, every piece of scrap lumber, every nail, we salvaged everything and hauled it into the bush.
I remember that, man. That was from the moment things melted enough that you could get into the bush, where it wasn't too soft. Pretty much from the age of 8-10 years old, man, you're just out there in the bush building, and you'd find places where you could build the big thing was growing up in a national park is you just couldn't do anything. It was a beautiful place to live.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But you would get in trouble for everything because the park wardens were all over the place, and they would tour anywhere around the town site. So when you're small, you can't really get out too far because you don't have a dirt bike, because they won't let you have a dirt bike.
Yeah.
But wherever you could get to, we would build some pretty amazing amazing forts and stuff like that. We carried a roll of carpet one time. Three of us carried a roll of carpet through the bush, probably like half an hour. And we had this giant kind of a half a teepee lean-to, the big fire pit in the middle. And we'd roll up the carpet under the lean-to. It was like a big lean-to. And then we could roll it out, and it had a big circle cut in the middle for the fire pit.
Nice.
And you would chill it out in a carpet in the middle of the forest and have this big fire. You could see the stars. It was really, really beautiful. Nice. The ingenuity of youth. Eh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
There's no limitations when you're a kid.
Well, when you're trying to find a place to bring girls, you get pretty innovative.
The shag carpet's going to be sweet.
Yeah. So, Footner Lake, I know all these kids have fond memories of it, and I used to do woodworking.
Okay.
And I had a bandsaw, and so...
He still has the same bandsaw. Yeah, he just replaced some parts in it the other day.
But these kids were into swords and guns and all that sort of stuff. So as soon as word got around that I was hitting the garage to do some woodwork, they would bring all the kids in the neighborhood. There was quite a few of you guys.
Yeah,
would bring their scrap pieces of wood, and they had drawn a machine gun or a pistol or whatever.
You were a popular guy in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and so I would spend all my first
weapons manufacturing.
Yeah. So I would spend my first half hour to an hour manufacturing their things, and then they would paint them up and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes I'd have to send the kid home to get another piece of wood because he had brought his dad's best piece of oak or something like that.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
No.
Right?
So, but that was fun. I think they had a lot of fun. Actually, I still have a bucket full of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Implements of war.
That's pretty cool.
I couldn't leave them behind.
Yeah.
We moved.
We spent our youth like fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That was
growing up beside an airport was cool. I have lots of cool airport stories, but I'll share one here. So my younger brother Jared, he's in the aviation industry now, but when he was a kid, I mean he was always into airplanes, and we had a tanker. We used to call it a tanker base. I don't know if they still call it a tanker base now, but that's basically where all the air tankers. So for firefighting.
Yeah, for firefighting. Yeah. Okay.
And back then they had they called it the B-26, which was the Douglas A-26 Invader, which was would have been Korea, Vietnam era plane.
Sure.
Adapted for, instead of bombs coming out of the bomb bay doors.
Yeah, water.
Adapted for water.
Put a big bladder in there or whatever.
And out of all, there's a million stories I could tell about like how cool it was. Like those guys would let us go sit in the planes and fire it up and do all this kind of cool shit. But
that is really cool.
One day, it was really busy, and we could hear the tankers fire up from our house. Like you hear those old prop planes, like whoa. There's like a certain sound that it makes and a big puff of black smoke, and Jared looks at me with a big smile. He's like, we should go watch the planes. Because typically what we'd do is we'd jump on our bikes and we'd ride down to the tanker base, and they'd let us sit on the guy at the time, his name was Pierre Paraday, this old Frenchman. And he tolerated us immensely. He'd be like, well, you fuckers can go sit over there on that picnic table, stay the fuck out of the way.
Yep.
And you can watch. And we're like, okay. So we'd sit there and we'd literally watch the entire air show all day. Planes coming in, planes going out. Like it was awesome to watch.
Oh, yeah.
So Jared looks at me and he's like, we should go watch. I'm like, I got a better idea. I'm like, here's what we're going to do. He's like, what? I'm like, just follow me. So we ride our bikes, and I took him to the end of the airstrip. So we get to the field. There's this big field, and we ditched our bikes, and we belly crawled like commandos to the end of the airstrip. It's a fucking forbidden zone. You're not supposed to be out there. And we laid there with our heads a foot from the end of the tarmac as those fucking B-26 Invader planes were coming in and taking off. It was so loud, I still remember it in my soul today. It was like this shattering... And I look over at him, and his fucking head's about to split in half from his smile. He's like, that was fucking cool. I was like, okay, we got to go. And we belly crawled all the way back out. But I still vividly remember, we had that awesome, opportunity because it was
we only found out about that about 5 years ago.
Yeah, never. It's not a story I told. Actually, it's a story I only started telling in my 40s.
Statute of limitations had run out.
I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks now. So it's like, it was fun, though, because I still remember. It was an experience that I remember just looking over at him, and his mind was blown.
Oh, yeah. That's crazy.
And he's like, can we do that again? I was like, no, we can never do that again. So
So one time only ride.
It was a one and done.
Yeah.
So, the kids got lots of experiences like that. And like, say, Footner Lake was a great fire district. I got an awful lot of experience.
Yep.
And there is where I got certified as an incident commander too. And I could have been certified a year or two earlier, but I said, no, I'll tell you when I'm ready.
Okay.
I wanted to be the type of incident commander when I went to a fire, they were happy I was there, not roll their eyes. And, because there's a certification level, you meet these criteria, you can be certified.
Right.
But that's the minimum.
Right.
And I didn't want the minimum. I wanted to be, like I said, I wanted people to have
It's like in
confidence
jiu-jitsu. There's a difference between time served and experience served.
Yeah.
Sure, and I'd imagine if you spent time in the industry, you're seeing what good leadership and those sort of things looks like, and what it looks like when some guy comes in that doesn't have the experience, and you're kind of looking at it and going, well, I think I want to be more like the guys who are doing it right.
See, and I got to still go out as an incident commander too. I just wasn't certified, and that built up my experience level. So I quite like that. And we were at the time, the Canadian Forest Service joint with the Alberta Forest Service was doing experimental burns up in a place called Big Fish Lake, which is up in the Caribou Mountains, and that's how the whole fire behavior prediction models and our hazard indices today in Alberta are used based on that research.
Okay,
well, I was lucky enough to go when we were burning the high end extreme, and if you're into fire, when you're dealing with extreme, that's pretty cool.
Okay,
as opposed to burning in a low hazard.
So what's the difference?
It's like playing with gas and matches instead of playing with caps in the driveway.
Yeah, I kind of get that. Like, but what's I guess what I'm asking is how do they grade that fire?
Oh, okay. Well, that's the scientists. They're doing all their calibrations and calculations and monitoring, like taking all their observations and all that. And okay, a black spruce stand when it's 10 degrees and 70% humidity, you can drop a match in there or pour a quart of kerosene in there, light it on fire, and the kerosene will burn, and that's it.
Right.
On the extreme end, you got, say, 30 degrees or 25 degrees and 20% humidity. You drop a match, and in less than a minute, you've got crown fire, where the fire's up and rolling through the treetops.
Right. Okay.
So
okay.
It's kind of like a redneck playing with dynamite or something.
Yeah.
So
you guys are getting to go out when it's kind of prime conditions for fire.
Yeah, and so I learned an awful lot about fire behavior then, because we lit up under some pretty extreme conditions. And one time we were trying to decide, like they were saying, okay, the plots were 100 meters by 100 meters. It was the size of the plot we had burned.
Right.
And it's black spruce, and they were betting on how long it would take to cross a 100-meter block.
Okay.
Before we'd put it out.
Right.
And sometimes we had trouble putting them out, but they said, "What do you think, Ken?" And I said, "Well, I'll say about a minute and a half, 2 minutes at the max." And they kind of all laughed, and I said, "What?" They said, "We fear it'll take 4 minutes." And I said, well, I asked him one more question about the weather or something, and I said, I'll stick with my minute and a half, 2 minutes. And we torched it up. Minute and a half. It was across the block. They kind of looked at me and, kind of, how did you know that? I fought fire in black spruce. You're very situationally aware when you're fighting fire.
Well, it's a difference between applied experience, because you've been there, done that.
Yeah.
Like that's on the job training.
Yeah. And these guys are the experts. These are the guys who wrote the thing, and they were good.
Yeah,
they were really good. But I had that experience where they were doing the book learning, and they were getting that experience.
Right. Yeah,
that's where they're building the whole.
That was the purpose of the
And another time, I mean, it's kind of a silly thing in a way, but the optimum time at that time of year was around 4:00 was the magic hour where things would go crazy.
Okay.
And we're going to do a single source burn in this 100 by 100 meter plot. It was going to be just a quart of kerosene and then light it on fire to see the rate of spread, how it spreads out and all that. And there was a big cumulus cloud coming. And I said to the guy in charge, I said, we should light that up right now. It's about 3:00 or 3:15. I said, we should light it now. And he said, no, we got to wait till 4. I said, yeah, but that cloud, if it gets in front of the sun and shades us in, that fire's not going to take off. It's not going to do it. It'll change the humidity. It won't do it. No, he waited. And I said, come on, you got to do it. Nope. They waited till 4 o'clock. The cloud was there. They lit the kerosene on fire, and it went out burnt the size of this table.
That was it.
Fizzled out.
Yeah.
And then the plot was done. It's dead. But they learned a lot too.
Yeah.
But again, you put the practical experience to it. And I'll just throw something out right now. A rule of thumb for fire, and everybody should know it, even just sitting in the city there and all that,
Yeah.
is when the temperature in Celsius is higher than the humidity, you've got what's called crossover conditions. You've got red flag conditions.
Okay.
So you can say you got 25 degrees here.
Yeah.
And the humidity is 20%. Be aware.
Okay.
Things are going to burn.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can be sitting in the city, but if you're aware of that, you know damn well it could be a bad fire day for the forestry guys.
Yeah.
It could be. But that doesn't work in the States because they're on Fahrenheit. So, you got 78 degrees and 50% humidity. Well, you translate that down.
Yeah.
You're not going to burn nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
Type of stuff. So it's just
different math.
Yeah, different math.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Before we get too further ahead in the timeline, when did you go up to, was it Baffin Island?
Oh yeah, I forgot to say that part.
So we have to rewind a bit just because it's an interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Between our first and second year of forestry, so summer 1970, because I started in the fall of '69, and it went over to 70.
Right.
In the spring, we had to get a job in the resource field, like as kind of a practicum between the first and second year.
Okay.
So my roommate had been offered a job with the University of Alberta as a field tech to go up to Devon Island, part of the Arctic, part of the Devon Island expedition.
Oh,
and that was sponsored by the Arctic Institute of North America, where guys are going up there and getting their doctorates or doing another doctorate degree or doing a master's degree and all that.
Sure.
And they need technicians.
What are they doing up there?
Well, ecology research.
Oh, okay. Got it. They had to research.
Because there's going to be some maybe oil and gas exploration in the Arctic and all that, and they wanted to get some parameters on the whole ecology environment. Sure. So anyhow, he didn't want to go because he was getting married that August. And this was a not come out, you go in May and you come out at the end of August. So so I said, well, I'd be interested in that. So he lined me up. I talked to our instructor, and so he lined me up with an interview. So I went and had the interview, and I got hired. So we flew in May, went up to from Edmonton to Yellowknife, overnighted there, and then to Resolute Bay on Cornwallis Island. I think Resolute Bay is. Anyhow, went up to Resolute Bay, spent the night there, joined the Arctic Circle Club, because by then we were north of the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
And then we flew into Devon Island in a Twin Otter, and they just land on the raised beaches. Like the ocean has receded from thousands of years ago by about a mile. So there's a series of raised beach ridges that are good landing strips. And these aircraft have great big balloon tires on them because there's these kind of like, looks like the old style of irrigation ditch crisscrossing them. And it was kind of like they call them an ice polygon or something.
Okay.
It was formed by melting ice. So these tires had to be big enough to kind of bounce across these, like these ditches would be this wide.
Oh, you don't fucking endo and roll the plane when you
So the big balloon tires, which is specifically developed for the Arctic, they just went over them. It's like hitting like hitting in New Zealand they call them a judder bar, but here a speed bump.
Yeah.
That'd be like,
Okay.
So I spent the summer up there, and I was really fortunate because they didn't have a lot of technicians. So I ended up working for a botanist, a microbiologist, two botanists, for about 5 different guys doing different types of research. But being a technician, you get all the scud work.
Yeah.
But I got so that I could identify plants by their roots because we washing roots and separating them. That's what it was. But the nice thing is, because I had to do plant collection as a requirement to have a plant collection for the second year.
Yep.
And I told them that every Sunday I had off to go collect plants. So once they all realized, well, I was going to be the plant collector, I started getting plant collections for the University of Calgary, University of BYU, Brigham Young, Riverside, California, U of A, about.
So that's just samples for their research.
Well, yeah, and I'd actually press them and all that, and identify them and mount them and all that sort of stuff. So I did a whole bunch of plant collections. That was fun, and I wish I would be more of a birder then, because there was some good birds there. But
I bet
muskox, and we ran across them.
Okay.
Did you get chased by them?
Yes, yeah. So we got chased one time and ended up on a big boulder, sitting there while they were snorting around. Then they took off.
Oh, geez.
See, I'm having to climb up and wait for them to fucking get disinterested.
Yeah.
And so the adrenaline was pumping pretty good then. We caught Arctic char.
Yeah.
Like, that was nice.
And I remember seeing fucking slides of it when I was a kid. The old man still has slides, right? A slide projector.
Oh, I remember slideshows, man. It was a big deal.
How the fuck did you ride a barrel?
Oh.
Like, explain that whole thing, because I don't think people have any idea, like, scientifically, how the fuck that's even possible now.
Okay, the barrel. This goes back to second year forestry school.
Okay.
We had the Bull of the Woods contest. And the Bull of the Woods contest was who's the best kind of logger type or whatever.
Okay.
There was axe throwing contests, chain wrapping contests. And one of them was riding a barrel. In other words, the barrels had 4 ropes going out, and it was like riding a bucking horse.
Okay,
and then the guys would pull the
I've seen that on video.
Yeah, pull the ropes to get it bucking back
and
forth, and good coordination would be going sideways and up and back.
Yeah,
and I made the local newspaper, and it was called A Short Bruising Ride, and they had a picture of me, and they put the biggest guys.
Yep.
On the and I was one of the smaller guys, but the biggest guys on the
ropes, yeah.
And they gave me a ride through hell. And
I just remember seeing the picture or whatever, the fucking sitting on a 55-gallon fucking rusty old drum, and I'm like, is that in fucking outer space? Like, it's in midair. Like, what the hell's even happening?
Well, that was
picture?
me.
Okay.
And I was taking just before I launched into midair.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you got to make your own fun, right? Like places like that.
That was fun. So,
okay, I thought that was related to the
not to the Arctic, no,
expedition.
No. But
so the role of a tech then, from a research perspective back then, is you're sample boy. Like, your job's to go and get the shit and
go do the scud boy, like dig the holes if they're doing a soil profile, clean the roots, clean the plants, whatever they wanted to do. All the stuff that the researchers didn't want to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're scientific whipping boy.
Today's they would call them research assistants.
Yeah.
Okay.
Technicians. So it was kind of if you're in the hospital, you'd be the bedpan cleaner.
Or
something. I mean, a little bit better than that lots of times.
Igor, go for brains. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, in some of the research papers I was Googling a while back online, my name pops up as, in the research paper, just kind of an assistant or whatever. They're not right about me, but, they do all these big bibliographies or all this.
Yep.
So my name kind of pops
everybody
up.
who's involved in the study.
That was an interesting, and everybody thought I was crazy for going, because we weren't coming out for 3 months.
Right.
And, but I figured, okay, a big chunk of Canada is the Arctic.
Oh, yeah.
And what better chance to go up there and learn about half of Canada?
You're literally being fucking paid to be there. Like, that's the best. That's the best possible scenario. Like, everyone wants to go and explore it and visit it, and they look at the cost. Like, well, shit, man, I've always wanted to go up there, but they start doing the math. It's like, it's cheaper to go anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Fly into
to go to the middle of nowhere.
So, like, our first leg of our journey, we were flying on a oil company charter plane.
Okay.
And all the guys were coming out or going up, but they were, and we said, oh yeah, we'll be up there for 3 months straight. They looked at it, are you crazy? You guys got to be absolutely crazy. These guys are going in for their 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out or whatever, and they thought we were absolute thing. They were all oil workers and that, and they just couldn't fathom it.
So were you guys in a work camp up there? Was there like a research facility?
No. It was all Quonset huts, canvas-covered Quonset huts, and they had all kinds of C rations or K rations from the Korean War, and the polar bears that got in there, and they'd in the fall. Icebreaker would restock.
Yep.
It would come in because the ice.
Okay.
So they'd stocked up the camp for the next year, and they had 2 or 3 cases of chocolate bars and all that sort of stuff. And the polar bears broke in that winter and ate all the chocolate bars, and there was shit all over. And they drank all the kerosene. The jerry cans, they'd been into them and sucked all the kerosene. I guess they like kerosene and chocolate together. But they...
fucking party animal bears.
There you go, man.
The one thing they didn't like, I think it was, if I recall correctly, they bit into one can of canned tomatoes, and that was it. We had all our case of canned tomatoes.
Just left them alone, eh?
Yeah, I don't know why, but I think it was the canned tomatoes. But it was a mess. But we had these sea rations from the Korean War, and so you'd go through them, and everybody's looking for the Camel cigarettes.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you'd like one of those things.
Exactly, it'll dry from a couple of decades.
And the best thing, if you could find pound cake, because even after all those years, pound cake was still good.
Yeah.
But some of the other stuff, you could just taste the saltpeter in it or whatever, just terribly. And then the freeze-dried stuff. I mean, freeze-dried stuff back then wasn't like now. Like, you'd do up a pork chop or something, and it would like taking a piece of corrugated cardboard, getting it nice and soggy wet, and then eating it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was just terrible stuff. It was, I would get some fresh stuff once in a while during a resupply.
Yeah, so catching an Arctic char would be a
big
deal.
That was fun. We'd eat that, and they were all full of nematodes though, but nothing in the flesh. But as you gutted them, there were just all these worms and that in their gut cavity and that, but never in the flesh.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to watch out for that for sure.
Yeah. And then, and I sometimes helped an ornithologist, his assistant, him and I would go out and we'd shoot stuff because he was collecting specimens.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd go with him, and one day we were out and we were meat starved, and we saw some snow geese, and we shot one, and we didn't turn it into a specimen. We got it and cooked it.
We need fucking protein.
Well, you're in the north, right? What are you going to do?
Yeah, so... It was an interesting time. Very good experience, and I've got no regrets whatever of doing that, and yeah.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that we capture that because I didn't know where in the
that was early. That was early in my career. Okay. So we're at Footner Lake, and I did the neat burning stuff, which was lots of fun. I got lots of good experience in that. And then things were changing in the Forest Service. They were starting to amalgamate the districts, and they were going to quit providing housing. Like, we had subsidized housing.
Right, yeah.
But to show you how poor forestry people are, the federal government, we had family allowance.
Okay, yeah.
And they were making some changes, and I said to my wife, well, we're going to get a cut in pay for sure. We got our first check. We got a hell of a raise. That made me realize how poor we were compared to all the other people up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so... But high level was good. The kids made all their friends there and all that.
Yeah.
So when all this stuff was happening, I had a chance to go to Turner Valley.
Where's that?
Be in charge, just southwest Calgary, west of Okotoks.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
So I had to take a cut and pay in because it was a demotion.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pretty upset about that because other guys had done the same thing and never took a cut and pay. But anyhow, went to Turner Valley, and I was in charge of the office there. For 3 years. We lived in Black Diamond, but I worked at a Turner Valley, and Blairmore was our headquarters.
Okay.
At Crow's Nest Pass. So I'd go there on a regular basis, and I was running the satellite office, and a lot of different stuff there, dealing with ranchers, a lot of grazing and that sort of stuff, timber permits, oil and gas exploration was way more restricted because of, and logging, a lot of more people aware. So, I mean, they're all from the city of Calgary. They hate everything that goes on with use of the land other than them hiking.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so it was pretty challenging dealing with those issues and that sort of stuff. And what I found out was when I was dealing with those kind of people, what's the motive? And you look deep enough, you could find the motive.
Yeah, there's always one there somewhere.
And very often the motive was quite self-serving.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They'd be talking about the grizzly bears, protect the grizzly bears, protect the grizzly bears. When you got to talk to them kind of a one-on-one and really talk, you'd find out that they had some special interest in an area or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of that. You know, a lot of I think one of the things we see quite a bit in environmentalism.
Yeah,
it's a lot of the not in my backyard. Right. So they'd love to, have industry or or cattle grazing or whatever. They just don't want to see it in their neck of the woods.
Yeah.
So they're going to raise hey, there's an ecological reason why we can't have this development here, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. But really, it's because they just don't want it in their area.
Well, I got to back up here too, because to me this is important to say. The East Slopes policy was designed, I think, in the 80s, and it was a really good policy protecting the East Slopes.
Yeah.
And when I was in Nordig, there was a big operation that wanted to go in called the Odyssey.
Okay.
And it was going to be on the Klein River down by Abraham Lake. A golf course, probably something like a Trump-style deal.
Sure.
Or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we had said no.
Yeah.
And they were fighting this all the time, but we kept on saying, no, we're not going to approve it. No, no, no. And then the minister changed. There was an election, the minister changed. And I won't say his name because he's dead now, but he single-handedly changed the East Slopes policy on the preface page, which said, no legitimate proposal will be categorically denied. And we used to, like for the Odyssey and that, we were saying, no, it's going to set a precedence.
Right.
For, private operations on Crown land.
Yeah.
And no, it's going to set a precedent. But when he put that, no legitimate proposal will be categorically denied, that's what we were doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So we had to approve it. It failed.
Keeping the door open.
Yeah. We had to approve it. It failed. They never paid their taxes and all that sort of stuff. But it never did get developed, thank God.
Yeah.
But then pretty soon some other things were in there, operations setting up, and so Nordig has really changed. Now there's a summer village there and all that sort of stuff, and and that sort of stuff. But years later, I was sitting in the dentist's office reading a magazine. It was a financial magazine, or what's happening in Alberta, and I was reading about the Odyssey, and a premier way back then had approved it in principle. And he was on the board of directors.
Of course.
And I thought,
of course. Yeah.
And so that just made me realize again, dig into what's going on.
Absolutely. And those kind of things continue to this day. There's some very contentious coal operations right now, on the eastern slopes that there's a lot of
Grassy
people.
Mountain, I think.
There's a lot of people that are talking about that. I find that hilarious because we're in a decarbonization part of our economy, but we're looking at possibly developing these mountain resources, and everybody downstream of coal operations has concerns, but we're just going to ship all the coal to China.
The worst in the world, right?
That just doesn't make any sense. But.
So anyhow, Turner Valley was very interesting. A lot of the ranchers were involved in the movie industry. I taught guys who wrangle, had their horses on Little Big Man. A lot of those guys do the stunts.
Yeah.
They supply the wagons, the chuck wagons, the stage coaches. They ran Unforgiven. Just about any movie.
Yeah, a lot of those westerns are filmed up there, eh?
And these guys are all involved in it. That's their second income.
Okay.
And it's always fascinating to talk to these guys and if they supplied the horses, they told me, at least one guy did, he says, I decide who can stand beside the horse, who can sit on the horse, who can walk on the horse, who can trot on the horse, or who can gallop on the horse. He says, that's my decision. So he screens people are going to be around the horses and all that, and he'll say, no, you can just sit on the horse. So if it's going to be like a guy trotting, then there's a double.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because
I guess they're not these horses down there, too. We're not talking about your fucking broken down nag off the acreage. These are $250,000 horses in some cases or whatever, or more, like whatever they're worth. But they're not. They're
not every actor is a rider, right?
No,
they
that's
have
right.
varying levels of.
And they would tell me that if the horses got stressed out, if they could see the horse getting a little bit stressed for the day of filming, they'd just shut her down. And I said, well, wouldn't the director get mad? Oh, yeah, he'd be furious, but I didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
My livestock, and I'm doing it, and weren't you afraid he'd fire you? Who cares?
Yeah.
They were looking after their livestock. So they were pretty neat guys, eh?
Yeah, I bet.
I quite enjoyed talking. And because I was in dealing with a lot of the ranching and all that, I made it a point. I listened to the stations that had the local, about grain and cattle prices and all that sort of. So I was a little bit in the know when I talked to them.
Sure.
Just to be able to go with a conversation and that. And
goddamn, Jed, alfalfa's taking a shit kicking.
Yeah.
Well, there's people that live on the edge, right? They live on that frontier, and forestry is one of those things where you're not living in the city. You're not in a populated area. There's by necessity, you're out on the edge of civilization where humans meet nature. That's kind of the nature of the job, right?
And I made it a point when I was in Turner Valley. I thought as a civil servant that I would try to say yes when people come to the office with an inquiry or want to do something. Mm-hmm. I made an effort to try and say yes. I'd say, why don't you do it in Calgary? Well, they always say no. And I'd say, well,
right,
I'll work with you. They'd have to compromise in some cases and all that sort of stuff. But I would try to say yes because I felt that was my responsibility to say yes.
Yeah,
with parameters or whatever.
Of course.
But when people come in and complain about logging and all that sort of stuff, I'd say, well, where did you see any deer or elk? Yeah. Where'd you see it? Well, in that clearing there. So that's an old cut block.
Yeah.
That was logged. Or they said I saw it on that seismic line.
Yeah.
Well, that was a result of oil and gas. Oh, they thought I thought that was a fire guard. I said, no, that was a cut line, but from oil and gas.
Yeah.
And I said, do you ever see anything just in the forest? Well, no, I see it along the edge of the road. Again.
There you go.
A road is clear cut.
Yep.
Type of stuff. And I'd say, logging is messy. I agree. But go out and look at it next year and the following year. See if trees are coming in. Maybe you end up finding the best berry patch going, whether it be raspberries or something like that. He says,
oh, man.
Go and experience it and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd always try to be positive about it. And I just say, well, yeah, I agree. It was they look terrible. I mean, I've been logging things that look terrible. But because I'm mentioning that right now, the people who are against, they used to throw around words like deforestation, the most critical roads. And deforestation is when you're changing the use of the land. So in other words, you clear cut 40 acres, your intent is never to put that back to trees.
Yeah, you're going to turn it into grazing land or build a city on it or whatever.
That is deforestation. But the intent is, but through law, good laws and all that, they have to plant that area within 2 or 3 years. They're not free of the responsibility until the trees are free to grow, which means they're about 4 or 5 or 6 feet tall. And that sort of stuff, they've got those responsibilities. So for anybody out there who's deforestation, your ski hill you go skiing on is deforestation. The road you drive there on is deforestation.
Right. Golf course is deforestation.
Golf course is deforestation.
But a cut block's not because it's going to be returned back to forest.
The intent is to return it back to forest.
I got a question, and this is something that a little bit came from when I was surveying. A little bit came from just growing up in Alberta, just spending a lot of time in the bush. Do you know how much of Alberta has been logged? Like how much of it is second or third growth forest?
Well, I saw a thing when I was still with forestry, and it was the size of a postage stamp on a door for just one of the areas up in that Athabasca area. So what the intent, it's sustained management. So the idea is if the forest puts on 1 million cubic meters of growth a year, they will not harvest more than 1 million cubic meters.
Okay.
It's called sustainability. And now they've changed in a lot of cases. Now it's a 3-phase cut. So they'll say you got 90 acres.
Right.
And they'll take 30 acres out in the first cut. And then, they go to another place where they're doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then they don't get to do the second cut, the second 30 acres, till the first cut is free to grow. So in other words, you have trees anywhere from 4 to 7, 10 feet tall.
Sure.
So they're established. They've been there for
Yes, it's
whatever
an
it takes,
established,
depending on the terrain, soil type.
it's
It
an
might take a
established
year, might
forest
take
coming.
3.
It's a new established forest,
Yep.
kind of simulating an old burn, like trees come in. And then they take the second cut, and then again, they got to wait for the third cut until that second cut is again at 4 to 10 feet. By then, the first cut might be 20, 25 feet tall.
Yeah, and I can't remember where I was. Like I said, I don't remember what capacity I was out in the bush. I was just with somebody.
Yeah,
that was kind of, we were in I can't remember where, but they're just saying like, no, none of these trees are like old growth trees. Like this whole area has been logged before and grown back. And I was like, well, how much? Because we hear a lot about old growth forest, and we hear a lot about. So I'm curious, like how much of Alberta, like is still virgin, untouched as it was 150 years ago. Like how much of it has really been logged?
Pretty well, most of what they're logging is untouched.
Okay.
Okay. Now I got to give you an example. Like when we lived in Nordegg,
yeah,
I've seen photos back in the teens when the mine was there and for railway ties and that whole area was clear cut logged.
Yeah.
And when we lived there, you'd never know it unless you walked through the forest and found the stumps, because pine mature at 90 years.
Okay.
About 90 years,
Okay.
a pine is probably where as big as it's going to get. And after that, growth really slows down to, rather than a foot or two a year, it grows down, slows down to maybe a couple inches a year, and it's kind of peaking. So, old growth forest, I mean, okay, a stand of spruce that has never been touched by the logging hand, because don't forget, Alberta's young. We're only been around for 120 years.
Yeah.
That forest, the last time it wasn't an old growth forest was when it burnt down. The boreal forest burned.
Right.
So then the new trees come in, and they've never been logged, but they're being logged now. So those, like spruce, matured about 140, around that, I think 120, 140 years old. It's been a lot of years, about that. So, the trees might be 250 years old now.
Right.
Because they haven't gotten to them. So that'd be an old growth forest.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because a lot of the forest itself, it's not necessarily human caused. Right? You have forest fires coming through that's kind of restart everything already.
I'll tell you right now that in Alberta, every stand, I got to make sure I word this correctly, is fire-based, like the pine forest and all that.
Yep.
The fire has burned them out and rejuvenated them. Same with the boreal forest. It burns, and then it grows back. Like if you look at the history, like when you're cruising timber and all that, very often you'll find from an old burn, you'll find a fire-scarred tree.
Sure.
Where fire went through years ago or whatever. So the forest, like say when pine burns, what comes back in is pine.
Yeah.
So if you drive through some of these areas that were pine and they were burnt in the last year, even 2 years ago, you'll see little pine trees maybe already popping up all over, because the fire, the heat opens the resin bond of the cone.
Yep.
So the seeds can come.
Yeah.
Now a spruce stand, when it burns, what usually comes in is aspen. Okay. And then after the aspen, like spruce are shade tolerant trees, so when they're young, they got to have shade. So about 20 or 30 years down the road, then spruce will start coming in under the aspen, because the aspen's providing the shade. And then eventually the spruce pokes up through, like aspen. By the time we're about 60 years old, they're kind of already mature.
Yeah.
And starting to die, like with rot and everything else. So,
sure.
And the spruce is coming up through, and then pretty soon,
it's all
maybe
spruce.
Yeah, because and the odd aspen that's still standing, but they've all rotted out and fallen down and all that. Now that's the simple. The scientists going to say that maybe more technical,
kind of the Coles Notes version of it for sure.
Yeah, and so that's the way it works. And so Alberta, all the forests have a fire history.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. Excuse me, I just got to use the bathroom. I'll be right back. Go ahead. I find that really fascinating. The forest is one of those things that just it kind of exists around us.
Yep.
And nobody really thinks about it until something like we get last year up here, where you have a large amount of fire and it starts to impact people's lives.
That's right. Yeah. And so, the thing is, we got too good at putting out fire.
Okay. So that's kind of where, where my line of interest goes, obviously, is the situation that we're in now. Like, how did we get to a situation like we had last year, or the past few years, where we're just having these, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wildfires?
Well, okay, we got good at putting out fire for a couple of reasons. There's I'll call it the European fear of fire.
Okay,
because
why European?
Well, I mean we're all Europeans, most of us here, right?
Sure.
So again, they had whole, towns burn out and all that sort of stuff back in the day.
Yeah.
So there's a fear of fire because of what it could do. And so I use that term very loosely, a European fear. There's a fear of fire.
Yeah.
Certainly our Aboriginals, our natives they used fire on the landscape.
That's what I've heard. I went horseback riding with an old horse wrangler up in Fairview, and that's what he was saying was about some of these areas. Prior to them being settled, they would be, the natives would come through and they would actually burn it out. Yeah,
and like, I don't know all the reasons for it, but part of it was it improved graze. Mm-hmm. It'd bring in the animals. A good example, if you did it in the fall, which maybe not go as crazy, in the spring, that'd be the first place to green up.
Okay.
Grass to green up. Well, that'd probably be a good place to hunt.
Yeah,
because
makes sense.
The grass is greener.
Yeah.
And that's so we got awfully good at putting out fire. The forest industry that has harvesting rights and all that, they pay a protection fee to the government to protect those forests from burning up.
I see.
Because there's not near the value in burnt wood as there is in green wood.
Right.
That sort of stuff. So they pay a protection fee.
Yeah. So I guess that's a good segue into this question, because I think it's a lot of people. So I used to work for forestry too, in a limited capacity. I did the thing. And obviously my wife works in the industry. But a lot of people do you think that nowadays, so politically we're like, oh, fuck, climate change. We haven't paid enough tax yet. The world's going to fucking burn. And that's why Kelowna and Slave Lake and Fort McMurray and is it because we haven't paid enough tax? Maybe that's not a good way to phrase it, but hey, I like to be controversial. Or is some of this a result directly attributed to human pre-suppression and suppression of fire activity? So what we have is, the timber companies are paying a fee so that the government protects that asset for them so that they have a livelihood in the future. There's a fire. Well, we're obligated to put it out. They're fucking paying us to do it. So we go and we put it out. And now again, I'm not talking about arson fires. That's a whole different thing. But let's say it's a lightning strike. And now we go and we put it out. And now what we've done is we've interrupted the natural chain of events that would take place. So what happens is I go and dump a bunch of water on it. Now what would have been a renewal process, that forest was due to burn. It's been sitting there for 100 fucking years. Is that directly contributing to the magnitude of fires that we have now in some cases, do you think? Because we've suppressed it for so long, because it's like, oh, there's a fire, we got to go. We go put it out, and we're protecting the interests of the logging companies or whoever the stakeholders are. Maybe it's the oil patch or whatever industry. Is it a contributing factor to why fires are so serious now? And do you think also that is it being confused with climate change as far as like, hey, holy shit, we actually have it's climate change, but maybe it's not because the planet's warming up. It's because we fucked with it. Like, are the two related?
I think they're related. First off, we got too good at putting out fire. And so fuel accumulation has happened.
Right.
Like, I could give some good examples. Like, you get into those areas around Jasper where it's the big Douglas fir trees and that sort of stuff. They got really thick bark. They're designed for fire.
Yeah.
But usually it would be, a fire would go through there, and because it was that montane regional, that there wasn't a lot of undergrowth.
Yeah.
And so it would be a
fast-moving fire.
Fast fire. Yeah. Burn a little bit, leave a fire scar on a few trees. The odd one might get totally torched up and that, but it would maintain the integrity of the montane region.
Okay.
Now with fire, because we suppress them so much, you start getting encroachment of brush, fuel accumulation, build up, deadfall, and all that sort of stuff.
Like ladder fuels, things that contribute to the fire being able to fucking climb.
Yeah. And then you get a fire that's, say, on a hot day where it's 30 degrees and 15% humidity.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so, and another thing, we are, I mean, there is some climate change. There's no doubt about it.
Well, the climate's always changing.
It's always changing. And right now I think we're into a long-term drought. And maybe not realizing it as much as we should. A good example is in 1988 when Yellowstone burnt up.
Okay.
They didn't realize, they said, okay, we're a national park. We're going to let it go. We're going to let it go. We're going to let it go. We're going to let nature do its thing. It's good. It's good. It's good. And then Armageddon happened. Suddenly it started threatening other values at risk, lodges, that sort of stuff. Suddenly it became maybe partly politics involved because, you're going to suddenly burn out a lodge or a town site or whatever. Yeah. But by then, the giant had been released, and they didn't realize. I mean, it turned into be a good thing because it renewed that whole forest. But they didn't realize they were in a long-term drought. They had their fire indices up, but they didn't realize they were in a longer-term drought than they suspected.
Yeah.
And when you get into those kind of droughts, everything organic burns.
Yeah.
The topsoil, all that burns, right down to rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or clay.
Sure.
Anything organic burns, and the way Mother Nature operates is all these are even aged stands, like the pine. They're even aged.
Mm-hmm.
And why are they even aged? Because they all burnt at the same time.
Right.
So then they all grow up the same time. And when a tree matures, at say pine is 90 years, well, by the time they're 110, 120, other things start to take over. If fire can't get them,
beetles.
Yeah, the mountain pine beetle.
Mountain pine beetle, which is terrible. Decay. Different things get them, and then eventually, Mama Nature says, "Well, boys, it's time to burn."
Yeah,
and then it burns anyhow.
Yeah. So if we interrupt that, so you're looking at say 100 to 150 years of where it has to renew.
Yeah. And logging is one way to stimulate that. A lot of people disagree with me and all that because they hate logging or whatever, but you break up the fuel.
I'm pro logging. Okay, so
100%. Yeah.
I don't want to burn up a whole bunch of time on this topic, but yes or no, does paying a carbon tax fix this?
Oh, I don't see it.
Okay.
For one thing, CO2 is a natural element. Trees give us the air we breathe from CO2.
Right.
And the trees fucking need CO2.
They do.
Or they'll die.
They'll die.
Yeah, and the way I understand it is there's a bunch of different types of atmospheric carbon, some of which is usable by trees and some of which is not. And some of the stuff that we get from burning stuff like oil is not as bioavailable for plant life as, say, something that comes out of burning wood, right? Some of that makes sense to me. I don't know the science, but that's recently I've kind of looked into it a little bit because, like, I believe that human beings we're not the cause of everything, but we're not insignificant either. We do affect our environment.
100% we do.
Right?
We alter it and shape it to suit our needs.
Yeah, and I think the more we understand it, like the conversation that we're having here, the more we understand our environment, we understand the world we're in, the better decisions that we can make. And I think a lot of people have the benefit these days of accessing a lot of information.
Yep.
But at the same time, what they're doing is they're just getting the information that's being presented to them along the lines of whatever agenda is out there.
Yeah.
As opposed to speaking to people like yourself that have a career in that world and understand how the natural ecology works and can communicate some of that information to people. Because I think we kind of get this idea now where we have smartphones, we have access to more information than ever, but we kind of think all the information is the same. It has the same value.
Yeah, no, it
and I think
and that's the whole marketing thing we talked about with social media earlier, whether they're marketing you a vacuum cleaner or an idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, like I say, we're in a long-term drought. I think we are maybe more so than people recognize. And
Sure.
I got to think back to, okay, let's step my career ahead when after Turner Valley,
Okay.
they rearranged again, and I was on the Mitsu fires, the incident commander on the Mitsu fire that tried to burn out Slave Lake. And
Okay.
this was in 1998. And 1998.
That's the year I met my wife.
Yeah. I had my 48th birthday on that fire. Anyhow, I was the incident commander, and it was a bad fire. Like it was bad. But so as a result of that, like my incident command team was out. Like I'm incident commander 1. We were out 3 times that year, and always to Slave Lake, to huge fires.
Right.
Huge fires. So Forestry did a reshuffle. And they went back. At one time they switched to 4 regional areas, and they realized those old guys were pretty smart. Well, that's why they had 10 forest areas,
Okay.
10 fire centers.
Yep.
Because we had the local knowledge and all that. And Edmonton's role was to coordinate all 10 things, set provincial priorities. Okay. So the wildfire operations officer position they created came open, and I applied to be a wildfire ops officer, which is going to big step up in my wages, my career. And I got Slave Lake. I was really upset because I had applied on Calgary, loved Black Diamond, and
Right.
the guy had been around there for 100 years. He got it.
Yeah.
So I was pretty pissed off at Human Resource. I told him so. But Slave Lake was actually quite an honor because it's the busiest fire district in the province.
Sure. Yeah.
And Slave Lake, the way I can equate it, if you get in a terrible vehicle accident on the highway, you want to go into a hospital that gets 15, 20, 30, 40 traumas a week, right? Mm-hmm. Slave Lake was like that. You don't want to go to a hospital that gets 1 trauma every 2 weeks.
Right.
Because your chances to survive are going to be way better. So Slave Lake was that kind of a trauma center type of stuff. We got lots of fires.
Okay.
Like those days,
a lot of resources, a lot of knowledge.
So I went there I started there in 1999. The spring of 1999 as the wildfire operations officer. And what the wildfire operations officer is, I was in charge of I had a manager to report to, but I was in charge of the field, day-to-day operations for detection, wildfire readiness, the air tankers, helicopter hire, all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
I was in charge of all that. So a big, and Slave Lake again is just a little bit smaller than New Brunswick.
Yeah, no,
so
it's a huge
Slave Lake Forest.
Yeah. So that was my area of concern. And that year, I was out as an incident commander in 1998. Well, after that season, I was certified as an incident commander 1.
Okay.
And so for the next,
is that like your top tier?
Top tier.
Okay.
So for the next 10 years, not only was I in charge of wildfire operations there, I was also an incident commander 1, where our team would be stood up on a regular basis, that if there's anything going on in Alberta that they needed a Type 1 team, my team would go. My team was sent to Montana, to Quebec, to BC, type of stuff over those 10 years. So Slave Lake was an exciting district to work in. Like I say, you didn't know what was going to happen, and I just loved that. If you didn't like the fire business, you got to get away from it, because people either love it or hate it.
Sure.
There's no sitting on the fence. You like it or you don't. But I loved the unknown. You didn't know what was going to happen. Like I could go to work in the morning and come home at 10 o'clock and tell my wife, my team's headed off. We're going up to Fort McMurray. Sure. And Valerie had talked about it today. Nowadays, it's pretty hard to leave on 2 hours notice. I could leave on 2 hours notice.
Yeah.
And I made a point. I never took days off or holidays and stayed in Slave Lake. I'd be working my yard. The tankers would start lifting off. I had to go back to work.
Yeah, exactly.
But so, Slave Lake, it was fantastic.
Kind of like living in a war zone. It's all around.
And sometimes we had as many as 7 tanker groups there, 1,500 personnel hired, like from all over the States and Canada.
Wow.
And I made a point. I briefed a lot of those people when they come in.
Yeah.
Told them what the situation we were in.
Yeah.
There was days we'd get lightning fires come through, and we'd end up with maybe 30 or 40 starts, and maybe 3 or 4 would escape initial attack. They'd be up and rolling.
Oh, wow.
Just rolling. So I had hundreds of National Geographic moments in the helicopter.
Yeah.
There's days I spent 7 or 8 hours in a helicopter.
Oh, wow.
Like, I'm not a pilot, but it's
Yeah.
the helicopter was working for me.
Yeah.
And as soon as we got a high fire hazard, a helicopter was assigned to me.
Yeah.
So I had my duty officers looking after the operation. I was out there seeing what was going on and talking to them on the radio and setting priorities.
Right.
Tell them what was going on.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff. And they were happy because I was out in the field. I wasn't there. But I was happy because I knew what was going on.
So you're putting together, air assets, ground assets, personnel. It's a lot like a military operation.
Definitely.
When you're bringing
I
it
can
all
tell you
together.
the
A lot of logistics.
The Forest Service can put together a camp quicker than the military by probably tenfold.
Really?
We can. I would presuming it's the same today. Like, I've been retired since 2008.
And that's kind of like, I did that for a bunch of years. I was in supply and logistics and et cetera, and worked out in the field like that. And it's amazing. Like, you can literally pick up the fucking phone and put together, like, you can have trucks rolling down the highway within hours and have a whole camp in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's pretty seamless.
Yeah. Well, I'd imagine because it's such the response has to be quick.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because you're talking about a fire moving, would you say, hundreds of feet in minutes?
Yep.
Then obviously, because one of the things about Canada and other places, but one of the things I've noticed about Canada is what we love to do is we love to put our house in the middle of the forest.
Yeah, fuck.
We want to look outside and see trees, and that's great.
Yeah.
Until
it's on fire.
I've got an interesting story about that. One day I was out with the fire chief. We had a really good working relationship with the Slave Lake Fire Department.
Mm-hmm.
Like, our guys would intertrain with them. They'd do hazard reduction burns together. If we were real busy, so the duty officer could call them and say, "Hey, can you hit a ditch fire we've got that we can't get to?" Oh yeah, they'd go do it and all that. So they had a really good working relationship. So anyhow, we were at one of the communities along the lake giving a talk on wildland urban interface and fire smart.
Okay.
How you can protect your house, your whatever.
Yeah.
And it was my turn to talk, and we had gone over kind of the parameters, like what you should do and all that.
Don't have a wood pile under your deck.
Yeah. That sort of stuff.
Don't leave your gas cans on your porch.
Yeah. All that sort of stuff. And I said, if you guys think for 1 minute we can save your houses the way they're looking here, right, you got another thing coming. Yeah. It ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
And they kind of, they got concerned and asked questions. And I said, well, the reality is it happens so quick that we probably can't.
Yeah.
And if we have to try and save your house, we're also diverting resources from the way the fire should be fought.
Right.
Your house is insurable.
Yeah.
And all that. So, I mean, it was a little bit controversial, but I did it now. About a year later, and we actually had a fire roll through part of that community the next year.
Okay.
And then the next year, so probably, I was in business at the Coast Plaza or the Coast Hotel in Edmonton on business. And after hours, we were sitting having a beer, and I went into the bathroom. I was having a pee, and this guy comes in, and he's having a pee. He looks over, he says, "I know you." "I don't know you." He said, "Oh yeah."
Weird conversation to have at the urinal, but
but yeah,
I do CrossFit.
Yeah, he said, "No." He says, "You talked to us at, I think it was in Widewater or wherever it was." He said, "You talked to us about that." And he said, "I remember you said we don't have a hope in hell of saving your place if that's what your expectation is." He said, "So I went and did everything you said we should do." And he said, "You know what? That fire rolled through. My house was saved. You had a beautiful house."
Yeah.
He said, my garage was detached and 100 feet or 150 feet away from the house because he was on an acreage.
Yeah.
He lost his garage and his outbuildings, but his house was still there.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So what is it that people like? If you're building, say, you're going to buy a patch of land, and you're going to put a house on it. What are you looking for? What makes a house more likely to survive a wildfire than not?
Well, I mean, you got to always look at fuel accumulation around your house. Like a nice green lawn is pretty safe.
Mm-hmm.
Type of roofing.
Okay.
Clean out if your roof is covered with pine needles or spruce needles and your eaves troughing are full of needles.
Yeah.
Those are fine fuels.
Because cedar shake shingles look really nice. That's a fucking bad call.
Yeah,
Tin?
you're putting kindling on
tin's
your
a good
roof.
idea.
Well, they're resiny.
Yeah.
Cedar emits a resin.
Yeah.
So you got that fire, like Lucas said, firewood stacked on your deck or under your deck, flammable substance planted right against your wall.
Yeah.
Give yourself a space because
A lot of people they will have their wood pile for their fireplace will be stacked up against the side of their house. Well, it's seasoned. That's my 2-year birch.
I don't store mine there because I don't want vermin in my house.
Yeah,
right.
But I never really thought about the.
Well, so if you think about your 2-year-old birch all stacked up nice, we all know how nice birch is to burn in a fireplace, and that's stacked against your whole fucking house with vinyl siding. Well, vinyl's plastic.
And when these fires roll through, it's very rare that the roaring fire burns the house down. It's the spotting ahead of time. Like I've seen fires throw stuff the size of my arm, a quarter mile. Because
so
there's
much
such
power.
Power, yeah. Like it's like nuclear bombs going off, and the energy, and so it's spotting. So burning embers the size of my fist or this big size of a loony.
Yeah.
Land on your roof, land in your eaves trough and all those pine needles, land on your wood deck, land in the flammable stuff.
Okay.
It starts burning, and pretty soon you got 3 or 4 spots burning, and your house is pretty well fully engulfed by the time the fire gets there.
Yeah.
Type of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why when the fire crews come in, if they're trying to save like in a developed area, they put sprinklers on your roof. What they're trying to do is get a dome of humidity.
Oh, I see.
It's the fire triangle. Heat, fuel, oxygen.
Yeah.
Well, a dome of humidity takes away the heat.
Right.
It cools it down. And
Yeah.
you need all 3 of those in order for ignition to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So you take away one of them, the dome of humidity, like just try and burn grass in the morning when there's dew.
Yeah.
You can
exactly.
go through a case of matches and nothing.
Well, anybody who's spent any time in the bush has tried to light a fire when conditions are not optimal for lighting a campfire, and you're fighting a losing battle most of the time if you don't know what you're doing, for sure.
Yeah, so, yeah. And one thing I learned when I was in Slave Lake that I like the locals would come in, like a lot of the contracts, like we had contractors set up for cats and hose and water trucks and all kinds of things to fight fire. And they'd be coming in to sign their contract or talk to you. You'd get talked to them. They'd say, yeah, we are building a well site and a sump out at such and such location. We were 14 feet down, and it was powder.
Oh, wow.
So I was in Lac La Biche in 2000 and something, early 2000s, and so practice back in the day, we'd have dynamite crews come in, and they'd fucking blow big holes in the muskeg. Drill a hole, fill it full of dynamite, boom, and that's how you create a pond, and that's where we'd set our pumps. Yeah. Because it was all muskeg, okay. So then you'd have a water reservoir that was dependable. It was like creating your own spring.
Yeah.
These guys were blowing holes out in the muskeg. There was no water.
Yeah.
So now they got all these big fucking smoldering craters.
Yeah.
Which whatever. I mean, they mitigated. They didn't get any fires from that. But these guys were blowing 50-foot holes in the muskeg. It was fucking dry, man.
Nothing there.
It's crazy.
So when you're in that kind of a situation, just imagine that. The way I can explain it the best, I think. When you're getting that deep, take a 6-inch sponge, then layer a 2-inch sponge on it, layer a 1-inch sponge on it, and then layer a 1/4-inch sponge on it, and saturate them all. Now, naturally, the 1/4-inch sponge is going to dry out first.
Right.
And gravity is going to pull, part of it's going to be from the air, but also gravity, the water is going to go down. So then your next layer is going to start to dry out and go down. It takes a long time to get the 6-inch sponge dried out, right?
Yeah.
Because of gravity and just the air to get at it and that. So you get all the sponges dry, and that's like, say, all the layers of our fuel down into the depths of the earth. And then you get 3 inches of rain. So if you think for 1 minute 3 inches of rain has saturated that soil 14 feet down, or 10 feet down, you got another thing coming. So you still have like your fuels and that. They'll say, okay, well, we've got time. Fine fuels in 2/3 of a day are dried out. That's things like grass, your hair, little tiny twigs, 2/3 of a day. The next layer, which is called the Duff Moisture Code, is 2 to 3 days.
Okay.
And then the next layer is even a lot longer, like can't remember, 30 days or 40 days.
Yeah, so we end up in months or even years the further down we get.
Yeah. So that's what happens. But I believe that if all that stuff below it is still dry, that the recovery back to a hazard is even quicker, because I believe gravity is working, pulling it one way.
Yep.
And air and the temperature and all that and winds and that pulling it the other way.
Right.
So I think in some cases we think we have a fire hazard of this, and
but in actuality it's actually much greater.
Much greater.
Yeah.
Because the science is only going a foot into the ground instead of 14 feet.
And I've had discussions with fire behavior guys about it and all that, and they understand my point, and they're just not sure. But to me, it makes sense, and I could be wrong, because I'm not a fire behavior expert.
Yeah.
I had experts for that. I had fire behavior guys, I had that sort of stuff. But to me, when you create it visually like that, so now in those years when we had that happen, we started. I'd tell the guys, do a double dispatch on tankers, because we usually had 2 groups. I says, if we get a smoke report, it'd send both groups. They'd say, why? And I said, well, because. And then you had to talk to the rappel crews coming in with their mediums, and there was nothing better than a rappel crew with a medium bucket.
Okay.
That they could think, and they'd come in and they'd either lost the fire or had a hell of a time with it. And I'd say, tell me, usually when that bucket would drop, it would buy you a couple minutes, right? They said, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I said, what's it buying you right now? He said, well, I don't know, about 30 seconds, 40 seconds. And that's when I made the decision to extend more resources to the preliminary report.
Because you're getting half the result out of this.
Yeah, and if they're in the air, they can always be sent someplace else, right?
Sure.
So I was pretty happy with that, and actually there would be a lot of naysayers out there maybe and all that, but the deputy minister at the time, or maybe it was the ADM, anyhow, he talked to me about that, and I told him what I was doing, and eventually it became kind of provincial policy.
Oh, I see.
That they would do a double dispatch a certain criteria.
Yeah.
And I was just doing it from my own
HFI 6 or HFI.
Yeah,
and fire intensity for that.
Okay, exactly.
So they may be overreacted, but his philosophy was, and rightfully so, what happens when there's a crash on the highway? You send the ambulance, you send the fire trucks, you send the police.
Yep. Send everybody.
If somebody gets there and says, we don't need an ambulance, the ambulance can be called off. Or we don't need the fire truck, they can be called off.
Yep.
But in the meantime, everybody's going. So it was kind of a thing. So I will say it wasn't because I did what I did, but I was a part of it that maybe led towards it.
Sure.
Because the eye was on Slave Lake a lot because we are a busy fire district.
Yeah. I think anybody in recent history will have some memory of
yeah. But I've been retired since 2008, so it's a long time ago. But still, it was a busy fire district. A lot of people knew who I was because so many people come through the forest to fight fire. Like we, very often we accounted for 33 to 40% of the fires in the province.
Sure.
So it was a busy place, and but it's something it was fun.
So during that, through all your time in fire, then statistically, I've talked to a few people, and they don't want to. How would you put it? They can't fucking talk about it or won't talk about it. What percentage arson wise? Because
when you talk about contractors, like that's I don't know if it's a myth or fact, but there's always the let's call it the urban myth.
Yeah.
That some wildfires are started by people who fight wildfires.
Sure. So even taking that out of it, like we had all the wildfires in Quebec last year, and Guy Beau, he's like, oh fuck, it's the climate change, and all the politicians we have to pay more tax to fix this or whatever the fuck, and then at the end of the season it all comes out like, oh shit, all these people are being charged. There's it has nothing to do with climate change it might, but the reality is a bunch of shitbags started all these fires.
Yeah, and
a bunch of
in
it was
Vancouver
arson.
Island, they found that all of the fires were
Right,
human caused in some way, shape, or form.
And a bunch of these, even in Alberta, historically, they were fucking arson. So
Okay, I can answer that. And
sure. So I'm just curious. Sure. So all I'm saying is that we have there's professionals who are in the field right now who, because of non-disclosure and et cetera, when you're working for the man, you can't really say anything. Yeah. But what from during your time in, what was arson a big factor in a lot of this stuff?
In some cases, yes. Yeah. We used to get what we call rodeo fires.
Yeah.
The rodeo fire would be coming to town, and so fires would get lit, so the guys would get hired, so they have some money for the rodeo.
Sure.
Okay.
Go to the rodeo.
Yeah.
Okay. I pulled some stats because I knew we'd be talking about this. In 2023, Alberta had 1,088 forest fires.
Yep.
Okay.
67% of them were human caused.
Okay.
And human caused could be anything from a power line to whatever.
Hot exhaust in the grass.
Spark
Yeah.
off a
If it's
muffler on
not
a
if it's not
quad.
lightning, it's human caused.
Yep.
Yep.
And of that, there's still so 33% are lightning, and there was less than 1% that are still under investigation. Like prior to that, the stats said there was about 4% under investigation.
Okay.
Because they would investigate, when I was there, we had investigated every fire that was caused.
Right.
And it was quick enough to know if it was lightning, but if it wasn't, then we tried to find the cause of it and all that.
Yeah.
Last year in Alberta, 125 of them were incendiary.
So that's with an accelerant.
Well, incendiary would be arson anyhow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the 125, so, okay, 1,088, 125.
It's almost
10%.
10%.
Yeah. Pretty well 10% of the fires were deliberately set.
Okay.
And then they kind of go on, like there was 45 fires were agriculture, 85 were power lines, 97 were recreation. That could be like spark from a quad or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we have industry where, okay, they cleared a pipeline, they burnt the fucking pile and something held over and fucked off. We have agriculture. We have the farmer cleared a field. He burned up a bunch of shit.
Yep.
Mostly it was looked after, but you know what? It wasn't completely out. And then the wind picks up in the spring and that fucks off. But
Sure.
So arson. So then statistically, it's safe to say that probably 10% of all major fires or fires in general are arson caused, man caused.
Well, based on
with
that,
intent,
based on that stat, I would say that it wouldn't be uncommon probably to have that stat around 10%.
Yeah,
I would think. Yeah. So
in your career in fire, were you involved in any of the investigations? How is it investigated?
We had the analyticals do that. Some guys are really good at fire behavior in their analyticals. So they would take a really tough fire behavior course, and then they would investigate. So when we were gearing up, because we were getting a hazard and all that, I always had one of those guys on standby.
Okay.
So that they could go out and investigate right away.
Yeah.
As to because there's burn patterns. Like a good example is you got a fence post, and the flame licks around it and goes up, like it burns up, and then there'll be what we call alligator scarring on one side. When grass burns, it'll fall towards the direction the fire come from.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Like because the one side of the grass blade stem gets burnt, and then it falls back towards the direction of the fire
that
where
makes
it
sense.
come from. So those types of things. And
there's my wife did I think it was called the wildfire cause and origin. She's an investigator too, right?
Oh,
of course she can't talk. She won't.
if she can't,
Yeah.
But
that's fair.
But the science behind it's pretty fucking fascinating.
Well, yeah, there'd be a forensic science behind it, right?
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. The science behind it.
Well, one of my buddies, when I moved to Lethbridge, him and I went birding a lot together. He was a retired RCMP, and he had done murder investigations and all that. Well, he ended up taking the fire investigators course, and he contracted to forestry for a few years doing wildfire investigations.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a combination of contracts plus in staff, like their own staff. That and interesting enough too, fires. I think in Alberta, I could be wrong. I think it's about 3% of the fires burn 97% of the hectares.
Yeah. Sure.
And across Canada, I think it's 5%. of the fires burn 95%. There's a bit of a difference, but it's close.
Yeah.
So it's only those few fires because they escape, and then you can get 300 fires that you get under 10 acres.
Yeah.
They call them campaign fires.
Yeah.
It's like the Battle of Midway, but it's like Cherry Hill or Lost Tree.
Well, that makes sense.
Foggy Mountain, like they have these.
That makes sense.
So if there was one notable fire, let's say through all of your career, one notable fire, one of those campaign fires that made an impact, on, say, the way that I don't know if I'd say it, the way that you lead or the way that you do business in fire. Was there any one particular big fire that was kind of like a changing moment in your life where you're like, okay, like from now on things are going to be different, and here's why? Like anything that was so kind of earth shattering, or maybe not earth shattering, but notable enough that it changed the way you thought about fire, the way that you whether led as an incident commander or as a wildfire operations officer? Was there one particular thing that kind of like changed everything for you?
A lot of them contributed to it. Foggy Mountain fire in
1995, or was it
95, 96? I was still in Footner at the time. We were still in high level.
It was 95.
Probably 95.
I had to be 95 because 96 I was in Turner Valley.
Yeah, southern Alberta was flooding. Bridges out, roads washed out. Northern Alberta was burning. And I was the incident commander on the Foggy Mountain fire. And we were type 2 at the time, incident commander 2, because it was in the Caribou Mountains, which were a bit lower priority. But we were at the Margaret Lake Fire Base, and one morning, and it was 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was watching the fire because it was across, it was a long ways away from us, but Margaret Lake was a fire base. So I was watching it, and the smoke column turned black. It got really black, and then kind of a bronzy color. And all of a sudden, it just leaned over and took off, like a big vacuum cleaner had sucked it.
So what does that indicate?
Well, it was taking off. Like
the change of the smoke color.
Yeah. Well, okay. White is not to worry about. Light gray, it's getting a little bit hotter.
Okay.
Medium gray, it's getting hotter. Dark gray, it's okay. It's picking up. Black is okay. When it turns bronzy, Jesus.
Which was what we had up here all last year. Was that?
Which was Lost Creek when we almost lost the whole fucking Crow's Nest Pass.
Well, that's it.
I called it copper.
Copper, bronzy copper. Yeah, for sure. So anyhow, it took off, and it made a big run. It made over a 7-mile run in not very long. So I called up. I called direct to the Edmonton weather. Like Forestry's got a really good weather section.
I bet, yeah.
And they got a good network of towers that report weather. So and plus remote weather stations. So they're pretty good. And I say, my fire, here it is, 7 o'clock in the morning, my fire just up and took off. Did I get hit by a low-level jet? Because you guys weren't forecasting anything like that. And they said, Jesus. They started looking and said, yeah, you did. And a jet stream, there were those high winds aloft.
Yeah, exactly.
But it had touched down, come down, and close enough to catch that fire, and then it just pulled it along. Yeah. So a little bit later in the day, like this fire was going. Me and my pilot, we went out and the flames were 300-400 feet high.
Wow.
Just, it was a National Geographic moment.
Yeah.
And we were actually going around the perimeter of the fire, and we got at the head of it, and all of a sudden I see his arm shaking in the helicopter, kind of shaking a bit and all that. And he's concentrating. I said, what's up? He says, we're getting sucked in.
Oh, damn.
We had got, like fire needs oxygen. So
yeah.
there's tremendous indrafts.
Well, so does the helicopter needs air pressure, right?
Sure does, yeah.
Yeah. So we got caught in the indraft. And he's doing everything he can to get us out of there because we're getting pulled in.
Yeah.
And he can feel it. We got out of there because I'm still here. But that was a pretty scary moment. And then a little bit later the same day, as we're going along, we went in and I call it a bay. We're going into the fire, following it, and we got smoked in. We couldn't find our way out.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty well zero visibility. Like ahead, you couldn't see more than 100 feet.
Oh, geez.
And you're looking below you, trees are burning, and the wind was horrendous. And again, as you go down, nobody's going to find you. You're going to be crispy critter.
Yeah.
So that was pretty terrifying. We were caught in that for about probably 15 minutes, wondering if we'd get
that's
out.
long
And then
enough.
finally we got some clearing. Like, he used his...
So he's instrument flying. He's like, well, if we go west or whatever the direction is, he knows that.
He knows which way down is.
Yeah, we knew which way down was, and that's
Yeah.
And that was the same fire that took out Ponton Tower.
Yeah.
Burnt it. All that was left was Ponton Tower was little molten chunks of aluminum siding from the cabin and that sort of stuff. I still got a piece of that. And then I can't remember if it was that same day or the next day, we burnt out a camp.
Oh, wow.
And my ops section chief, he calls it, Ken, we're losing a camp. And the guys are in it. It was a 25-man crew. And we got those guys out of there, kind of like the last load leaving Vietnam type of stuff. We got them out. They lost all their gear.
Yeah.
When I went back later to look at the camp, the Melmac plates we had back then are sitting on the table. Like those guys the firefighters are really good at building tables and all that. Yeah. So all the meals are sitting there, a half-eaten pork chop with a bite out of it, and the potatoes and all that. They're all burnt to a crisp, and the plates are kind of curled up, and where the tents were, just the metal rings from their gear. Like if the gear had a zipper on it, or and that was, it was Armageddon. It was bad, and I tell you, you get that feeling that. You get that throw up feeling.
Yeah.
I didn't throw up.
Could have been bad.
Yeah, it could have been bad.
Yeah.
And so I know my ops section chief learned a lot, and I did too.
Yeah.
And what we did, we put the camp, you're supposed to put the camp in the black. And being in the black is dirty, dirty, dirty.
What's that mean, in the black?
Well,
it's where it's burnt, so it's the safe area.
Oh, okay. So the fire's already come through. Yeah, yeah.
So we put the fire in an old burn. There was hardly anything. It was low vegetation. Mm-hmm. It had burnt maybe 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I thought, well, that's close to the black, and it's a lot safer and all that. But we were in the fire again. We were in that drought that we didn't realize. And one of the guy who used to work for us, he said about the Caribou Mountains. He said, you don't get holdover fires in the Caribou Mountains ever. That year we were getting holdovers in the Caribou Mountains. So there's rule number one. Mm-hmm. Pay attention to what the local guys say. And if we're getting holdovers, why?
Yeah. And a holdover fire is from...
say the lightning strike was the day before, or
right.
2 days before, and it didn't go out. The fire's still there. But it wasn't detected.
Gotcha.
So it's a holdover.
Yeah.
And and then when we were out, I started noticing when we were flying around the fire and all that, I was seeing cracks in the ground. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of semi-discontinuous permafrost and all that up there. I was seeing cracks in the ground that if you dropped a screwdriver down it, you'd never find it. The cracks were from the air. The cracks looked this big, but they were probably a lot wider from the drying out.
Yeah.
So there was an indication that I wasn't picking up on until after the aftermath, because there had been the indicators there.
Right.
So I learned to pay a lot more attention to some of those subtle indicators.
Okay.
And it's just like the weather forecasters were always out by 12 hours for fronts coming through. And the local knowledge guy said, they're always out by 12 hours. That front will come through 12 hours early.
Sure.
And sure enough, it would.
Yeah.
And once you get to know that, you gear up accordingly.
Yep.
So we'd man up kind of that day early. And they said, what are you doing? Those fronts come through early.
Yep.
From the forecast. And sure enough, they would. So you learn some of those local things, and then you pass that knowledge on too.
Yeah.
To others. And when I was in Footnoe Lake at John Wayne Ponderosa, that's where I got towered by a bear. We were fixing a weather station.
Okay.
Servicing it and all that, one of those remote weather stations.
Yeah.
And we had just had the tower laying down. And we stood it back up and bolted it back together because a lot of stuff is on the tower. Mm-hmm. Rather than climb it, it was easier to...
That makes sense.
To lower it down. And we put it back up and got everything. And we'd seen a bear coming. And I banged the tower, the side of the pole to let the bear know we were there. Mm-hmm. And, the brush was maybe... between half a meter and a meter high. I could see the shoulders of the bear and part of the head.
Yeah.
So I banged a pipe on the tower, and the bear click this drop, like they'll make a clicking sound, a snapping, clicking
Yeah.
sound. I knew the bear was going to charge.
Yeah.
I went up the tower right away. I knew what the hell was going on. The other guys weren't bushwise. but I
Yeah,
knew.
exactly.
So they saw me going, and the bear was coming, and they were
Yeah.
running. So they all come up the tower, and I guess I was told later that they had to push me up a few feet higher because they
They didn't have
there
enough
was-
space to get the fuck
Yeah,
up there.
I was safe, eh?
Running out of real estate.
But anyhow, so the helicopter, it's sitting off about 100 feet or 150 feet to the side, and the pilot's in there reading a book.
Yeah, doing
And
whatever.
we're going, the signal.
Spin it up.
Spin it up, spin it up, spin it up. And finally he realized, so then he starts stood up and he wonders, what the hell are they all doing on the tower? So then he got,
What do you think?
well, he couldn't see the bear.
Oh, yeah.
So he gets up there and he flies, and the bear had 2 cubs. We couldn't see the cubs.
in the bush. Yeah,
In the bush.
yeah.
And so he finally got them chased away. He got the sow chased away, but the cubs are still there. So he had to really work on it
Mm-hmm.
and then finally he got everybody chased away, and then we come down. And then my boss at the time, he sent out an email to all districts across the province that somewhere along the line these towers weren't supposed to hold more than 600-pound capacity. And he said, Orich and company have proved that these towers can take in excess of 600 pounds and all that. And you left it at that. Somebody's kind of wondering, what the hell? So you start getting phone calls and it's, we got towered by a bear.
Tower
Oh,
instead of
gee.
treed by
Yeah,
a bear.
so-
But
yeah.
one of these days I'll tell a bunch of cool flying stories from my time in the Coastal
Yeah.
Pass, like fucking near-death
Absolutely.
experiences
Yeah.
riding in a Long Ranger.
Yeah, if you're spending any length of time into helicopters, it's
I mean,
they're
I was
not
in
meant to stay in the air.
No, I never had any crashes, but I mean, in helicopters where we've had a turbine failure and a few things like that, but we were always, or a governor failure rather,
Mhm.
and a few things like that where you had to put down and call for help that you weren't going anywhere.
Sure.
And but Slave Lake was really good. Like I said, it was an exciting district. There was a lot went on. I gained a lot of experience,
Mhm.
and like I say, by then I was an incident commander 1, and my team got to go to a lot of different places and that, and it was busy. Lots of times, like I say, we had lots of air tanker groups, crews from all over North America, fires going like crazy,
So what year did you you retired in Slave Lake, and what year was that then?
I retired in July 1st, 2008.
Okay.
And the reason I choose that, first off, when I decided I was going to retire, I had my 35 in.
So you were would that and you did 10 years in Slave Lake then?
10 years, yeah.
Yeah, 10, okay, yeah.
So I was 20 years in strictly fire.
Yeah.
For 20 years in Footner Lake
Okay.
and then in Slave Lake. And because I love my job so much, like I knew one day when I wasn't going to have a midlife crisis because I hated my job.
Right.
I was to work early. I loved what I did.
Mhm.
I loved the people. And sometimes you had a shitty day because you were dealing with the human resources issue and all that sort of stuff. But the adrenaline was always there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't an adrenaline junkie. It was just you learn to think on your feet.
Yep.
And you never knew what was going to happen, and I was okay with that. A lot of people can't stand that. But when I decided to retire, that was probably about January in 2008. It was in that winter anyhow. I'd taken some pre-retirement seminars and stuff like that, so kind of I knew what to expect. But I had to be able to make peace with leaving.
Yeah.
Like, because so many of my counterparts, they would retire and be back the very next year as a contractor,
Sure.
back in the fire business. Well, they never had any authority. They were contractors. Well, why would I give up somewhere I was in a place of position?
Mm-hmm.
I had a good salary, had good benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I give that up? So it took me about 5 or 6 months to make peace with leaving. I had to be able to walk away from the fire business.
Yeah.
I had to be able, in my mind, I knew I had to be able to do that.
Yep.
And then it's not a good idea to retire in the fall.
Because you're stuck in all winter.
Yeah, depression sets in and that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. And so I wanted it to be summertime. But May could be really interesting. Lots of action in May.
Sure.
So I got thinking about all that sort of stuff. And I thought, well, if I retire on July the 1st or June the 30th, I retire in the summer and I go out with a bang because July 1st.
Yeah.
Type of stuff. And so I come to that decision, and I really thought about it, and I give my notice, and I retired, and I was able to walk away from it. I never checked the fire hazard like a lot of people would be on the internet checking. I never did that.
Yeah.
The only time I paid attention is if it come up on the news.
Sure.
And then I'd get a little bit interested. And the way it turned out, the guy who replaced me, a great guy, the following year he was killed.
Oh, really?
In a motorcycle accident. And so I phoned the boss at the time, the guy who'd be my manager, and I said, I would be willing to come up there and look after operations so that the staff can grieve.
Sure.
And they know how I do business. They know I'm not going to be there to change things. I'm not there to take over and all that.
Yeah.
But they know how, and they would give them a chance. And he said, well, let me think about it. I said, okay, but the offer's there. He called me back within the hour and said, when can you be here? I said, I can be there tomorrow. So I went up there for about a month.
Okay.
And it was busier than hell. It was
Yeah.
in June, lots of fire action. And my prediction was right. The staff were very happy to see me.
Mm-hmm.
They knew how I did business. And so they weren't worried. They had time to grieve. And I didn't have anything to do with human resources.
There you go.
I was strictly there to run the wildfire operations.
Yeah.
And it worked out really good. And I got my little taste of it again.
Yep.
And but to show you how the impact can have on your life, on your career, or I got into volunteering when I went to Lethbridge. And one of the first things they were advertising for Red Cross people to, say if a house gets burnt out, the Red Cross shows up.
Yeah.
The police call them usually. They show up and they get you hotel accommodation or whatever and look after all that because generally insurance is going to pay for it anyhow. But the Red Cross would be there to kind of console you and get you all
help
set
someone
up.
out.
Yeah. And so I took the training. I had an interview first. And they said, yeah, with my background, definitely. I took the training. And then they called and said, okay, you can pick up the phone on Friday. And like I'd be a 1 week on or 2 week, I think 1 week on, and there'd be somebody else with me too, but I could pick up the phone.
Okay.
And they said that, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I can't do it. I've been on standby for 35 years.
Yeah.
I cannot, and it surprised me.
Yeah.
I was just mortified, but I realized I could not do it anymore.
Yeah, because you'd let go already.
Yep.
Right.
And being on standby takes a lot out of you.
Well, you spend, because, you got 35 years of being on call. You're every evening, every weekend. Yeah, you're on a rotation sometimes where, okay, cool. But more than not when you're at the top, the higher you get to the top of the incident command system, as it was called then, is you don't really, you're on standby, but you don't get a fucking choice. The rotation isn't the same. You're not on the same rotation as the Rangers. Yeah. Like those guys are like, okay, I'm on every fourth week. Yeah. If it's fucking busy, you're working. When that phone rings, whether you're on call or not, if you're in town, you're fucking going.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You don't get a choice. And that takes a lot of it is what it is. I mean, the human toll that it takes on you as the person that takes that responsibility, the toll that it takes on your family, your wife and your children who have to grow up with that. Yep. So I think when you decided to walk away, the idea of going back into that, I wouldn't be there either.
No, and I would do it over again. Yeah, for sure, because I have no regrets. But it was interesting. I'd be away on fires or making good money and that sort of stuff. And my wife would change the furniture around or something like that, eh? Yeah. And I would come home and it would upset me. Yeah. And I thought, and I'd kind of give her the gears about it. And why did you do that? And all, and she'd be mad at me or upset with me then because I was questioning her. And I realized that when you're in that kind of a high stress environment, like that didn't bother me. I thrived on that. Yep. But coming home was the sanctuary. Yep. No changes. because when you're at work, things change by the minute.
Yeah,
and so there was that kind of sanctuary that I could come home. The Chesterfield was here. It's small things, but once I realized that, I laid off. I quit being upset.
Yeah.
About it.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of partially being the I don't say the head of a household, but like for an example, the other day, so my daughter walks in the door. I'm like, "Hey, beautiful, what's up?" She's like, "Oh, nothing. Just getting home from school." I'm like, "Where the fuck is your brother?" She's like, "I don't know." I was like, "What do you mean you don't know?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you guys ride the bus together?" She's like, "I don't know." I was like, "Okay." The boy walks in the door like 10 minutes later. I'm like, "Where the fuck were you? Like, did you get a ride?" He's like, "Oh, I walked. Sometimes me and my buddy, we walk home."
Mm-hmm.
And at first I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck? Like, I bought you a phone.
Yep.
And I expect you to ride the bus and be with your sister and all these other things that I think about, like, and I'm like, because I want to know where he's at.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I started thinking about it. I was like, initially I was kind of upset. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute. He knows how to walk home.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
He's problem solving, like, he in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells me, he's like, "Yeah, sometimes when I walk, I'm faster than the bus." And I'm like, he's also fucking smart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He just wants to sit on that bus. But it was just an interesting, like, where I had this preconceived notion that, he must get on the bus and ride home every day. But the actual fact is he walks a bunch of the time. And I was just upset because I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
And then I also thought, well, does it fucking matter that I don't know about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like, it's one of those, I think that's that little bit of control where we always expect our home life and our children and our wife and our family, that aspect, that it's going to be this very solid thing that we know everything that's happening all the time, and we draw comfort and strength from it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then but it doesn't take much. It can just be this little ripple in it. And we're like, what the fuck? Like, it's kind of, and it's not because it's not necessarily that we have any right to be angry or that it's upsetting. It's just that it's like, damn, I guess I spend all this time being in charge or being in control of other things, wanting everyone else around me to take my examples of leadership about being an independent thinker.
Yeah.
Don't wait for somebody else to do it for you. And here my boy's actually doing that. And my initial response to it was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the wrong response. Now, I didn't take that out. Like, that was just something I reflected on. It took me a while, and I thought my way through it. I was like, well, I'm just being stupid.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, that's just where we get, like, with
and my wife pointed out to me a few times, me and the kids don't work for you.
Yeah.
Because naturally when you come home, you got to wind down, and you're used to, like, I'm not an alpha male, but in the fire business, there's times you got to be an alpha male, and I go alpha.
Sure.
And because you have to.
Yeah.
Well, being an incident commander, ultimately you're in charge. And
and
everything that happens, the buck falls on you. Like, it's ultimately.
Yeah, it's different.
I see we're ready to wrap up, but I'll say one last thing. After you retire, I was about 4 or 5 months after I retired, you have a little conversation with yourself in your head. Who am I? Who is Ken Orich?
Yeah.
And the reason you have that conversation is you're after 6 months of retirement, you're out of holiday mode. Maybe it was 4 months after you, but you're out of the holiday mode, and then you're back into reality. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I was a guy with authority, a lot of people working under me. I was somebody. I was Ken Orich somebody.
Yeah.
Now I was retired, and I was Ken Orich nobody.
You feel that way for sure.
Well, yeah, because because forestry was a big family.
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. So I had to find another family. So that fall, I saw an ad in the paper for the Helen Schuler Nature Center looking for volunteers.
Yeah.
I thought, Nature Center, I like nature. So I went down there, and I've been volunteering there since October 2008. I've got just about 3,400 hours of volunteer time in.
Okay.
And I found a new family.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you said you've taken up birding.
Oh yeah, I've been birding.
Taking it up.
Yeah, that's
his new fucking job.
Yeah, but one of my volunteer things I do for them is if anybody follows them on Facebook or wants to, I do the bird of the week for them, and it's my pictures and my write up. And every Sunday morning at 7:00 is bird of the week.
Yeah.
And I talk about a bird that people are going to probably see locally. I tell about it, and there'll be a photograph that I took and all that sort of stuff.
You're looking at a book, you're like, what the fuck is a white-faced ibis? Call Ken Orich.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll put a link in the description for the podcast.
Take you on a
hunt.
Yeah,
so I've been doing that for them, and I do bird walks for them and different stuff like that. So like I say, I've got just about 3,400 hours of volunteer time. So over the years, and they treat you like gold. They love their volunteers, and it's a whole bunch of younger people there. So when you're around younger people, like I have a hard time thinking I'm going to be 74 here next month.
Oh wow!
So
yeah, hard for me to believe it too.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, awesome. Well, again, thank you for coming in.
Oh, you bet it was.
Thank you for sharing all your knowledge and your experience with us. Lucas and I talked quite a bit last year. Obviously, we had a lot of fires, so we talked about who could we talk to that would have some insight into what's going on, because we looked at a lot of the media, and there's a lot of there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of assumptions that get made about forest fires, about forestry in general. So
well, here's an interesting thing that I think I can clarify that people don't understand is there's the forest protection area, which is the green zone. Mm-hmm. And that's the Forest Service. I don't know what they're called now, the wildfire people, the provincial government.
Yeah, with Sustainable Resource Development, and now there's some new thing.
Whatever they are,
lands and agriculture.
They look after the forest protection area.
Okay.
So that's kind of a line, say, north of Edmonton, probably south of Athabasca, all the way to the Saskatchewan border. But you come down on the west side, so just kind of
follows the slopes.
Yeah, kind of east of White Court. East of White Court.
Wherever there's bushes.
Rocky Mountain House, Calgary, all that. That's the white area. That's out in the protection zone. And then you got big divots like the county of Rocky Ford, or one out of west of Edmonton. That goes almost all the way to Hinton.
Right.
So, and then you got the yellow zone, which is also out of the forest protection area, and up around the Peace Country, around High Prairie and all that. So those are areas that are actually not under the Forest Service protection for fire. It's up to these guys to look after fire themselves.
Right. That's all county stuff.
Yeah. So the counties. Yeah. So one thing, they don't have the resources or to build up, like when they're getting to a fire hazard, to have resources on standby, to have fire crews on standby, and that sort of stuff. So when all that stuff happened, forestry's just starting to bringing on the resources around mid-April, like their seasonal crews. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of them are university students and that sort of stuff, and they're ready about mid-April. So you got to train them. You got to do the safety stuff with them. But usually everything's pretty functional by the beginning of May. And they've got contracts. Like a lot of the reserves have fire crews that are under contract.
Okay.
And so they're guaranteed so much, so you can bring your contracts on maybe a little bit early. But same with air tankers and helicopter contracts, they're all geared up to be staggered.
Right.
And generally you don't have that kind of a season in early April. So these contracts start a little bit later to go to cover the fire season. And they're staggered. So you can't, it's hard to call up and just suddenly say, hey, I need 6 tanker groups. Some of those contracts might not start till the end of May. Or mid-May.
Yeah, and some of those companies also have other provincial contracts. So their early season, they might start in BC and then be on contract for over here for whatever start date.
Yeah, that's it exactly.
There's interprovincial as far as like
and so many of these early fires were in the the non-protection area.
Yeah.
So it was easy to blame forestry or whatever for a lot of the stuff.
Okay.
But that wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't under their mandate.
It wasn't under the mandate. They helped as soon as they could. I'm sure of it.
Yeah,
But I mean, again, if you don't have your resources on, and now they've increased the fire season. It started beginning of March this year.
Yeah,
I think it's March 1st.
Yeah, March the 1st to try and get some of that stuff to bring in some of your contracts early and all that sort of stuff. And the budgets will only allow so much. Like you cannot, the taxpayers will not pay for your worst years. So you have kind of a set. You go on your average.
Yep.
And that's what you get your budget for.
Sure.
Bad years, kick your ass.
Yeah.
And when they're going for help from Ontario or BC, same boat for them. They're just bringing on the resources.
Yeah, because they've only got so much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yep.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you for sharing all that with us.
Oh, you bet. Yeah.
That's been great. Normally, I'll start a conversation.
Fuck, you know what? And it's funny because this happens more often than not.
It does, and yeah, I don't. I find that, like, a lot of these conversations are very organic, and they just kind of pick up.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of reading a piece is something that I kind of originally thought of to get conversations going, which does happen at some points. But since it's the tradition, I do have one picked out that I'll read.
Yeah.
Right at the tail end here.
Okay.
And yeah, this one's called Eyes That See in Color. So, eyes that behold the light, sapphire blue suffusions, reflections through spectrums of deep red hearts pulsing, expanding with mass, gathering faster than heat burns, hot white and corona yellow, in purity with conversion. Bright soul of brilliant fires burning long down to even cold azure, off-gassing green luminescent and striking crystalline veins of indigo and amethyst. Roiling in the deep plasma cauldron, forming the universe, riding the great graviton dragon, scales that shimmer, oyster shell, steel chromatics, wave, strange star-fired alloys, smashed from star clusters, bombarded by alien radiation. Born of a billion stars, forged into shape by dark forces filling the gaps in between the light. Beyond the distant fantail of the light particle deltas lays the long impenetrable black, the was before and the always will be, the edge of the first unknown, the riverbank of cosmic consciousness. Back in the backwater, simple white dust spiral, the rock water ball calls eyes that behold the light and wander at the darkness, birthed by the fates or the architect, to behold and to be beheld through eyes that see in color. So,
Damn, brother.
something about the universe, I guess.
Yeah. I wanted to say this earlier, and you can cut this out, but
No, we leave everything.
okay. Well, no, like
breaks too.
like you guys talk a lot about guns and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
And when we were at the ranger station in Nordig, these kids started shooting pistols when they were 4 or 5.
Yeah.
But I had a pistol since 1971 or 72, a single 6.
It's in my safe.
Yeah, I did lots of shooting back then, and the FAC.
Yep.
Come in 1977.
Yep.
And that was under the Paul Martin. It was under the Liberal government anyhow.
Yep.
And at the time, with all this stuff and that, I thought, well, it's not a bad idea. Just a little bit of not any asshole can get a gun or a
Sure.
bit of a thing. But and to sell it, the feds come around to all the small towns. Like, so I was stationed in Red Earth, but I went into Slave Lake, and a whole bunch of us went down. The feds had rented a hall or a school gymnasium or something.
Okay.
And you had to fill out your FAC form.
Yeah.
And part of it was you had to have a guarantor that you knew for at least 2 years sign
Right.
for you, like a passport.
Like a passport, yeah.
And the people in charge, they said, well, we'll sign that. And a little warning bell went off in my head. Wait a minute, it says 2 years. Being government, you know about documentation and
Yeah.
fill out the forms and all that. So the girl filled out that guarantor part for everybody
Mm-hmm.
because they were pushing it to sell it. And at the time, it kind of struck me as, okay, they've either broken the law or
Essentially.
broken their own policy. I'm not sure if it was
Yeah.
legislated yet or whatever, but to get compliance. And I always figured that was my ticket out of jail, having that information.
Yeah.
And that was fine. FACs were okay. I had my handguns. I was an up and high level. I could get a permit to go for a year to the shooting range in Hinton, and then the gun laws changed, and I had a permit anywhere in Western Canada as long as I was going to gun run, including the territories. And then in 1995, when the long gun registry come out and all this sort of stuff, I made a decision then. I wasn't happy that I gave all the kids my long guns.
Yep.
Because I wasn't going to register them.
Yep.
And the thing is, the reason I did that was I had registered handguns.
Mm-hmm.
So they already had me. I had hunting licenses over the years.
Sure.
So checking a database, that they could always think,
Yeah.
well, this guy had hunting licenses for moose or elk or whatever. He's got long guns.
Obviously, yeah.
I had a chicken license or upland game. He's got
Yeah.
a shotgun, all that. So that was the first time I made the decision to give the guns to the kids and they would register them.
Yeah.
That I was afraid of the state.
Interesting.
I'll call it, I was afraid of the state.
Yeah.
I have all the guns.
You start seeing that first signs of overreach.
Yeah.
Right?
Overreach, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And, handgun laws in 1934, you had to have, if you had a pistol, you had to have it registered.
Okay.
Since 1934.
Yeah.
The government has never told you that the handguns had to be registered.
For that long. Yeah.
During-
100 years in Canada.
Yeah, 90 years.
Yeah.
In World War II, guns had to be registered.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid of subversive activities.
Yeah.
But as soon as that World War II was done, that went away.
Okay.
That went away.
They kept the income tax.
Yeah, whatever.
Of course.
So that went away, and then since then, then the FAC comes along.
Oh yeah, just more and more control.
And then it's got more and more control.
Yeah.
So, like I say, I just wanted to say that was the first time I was afraid of the state.
Oh wow.
Because of that.
Yeah, and a lot of people in Canada, we have this kind of a different idea of our government and our country. A lot of the Canadian identity is kind of predicated on the idea that we're not the United States.
Yeah.
But
and they play on that.
Yeah,
like we are.
Yeah, but I mean, our government's no better or no worse. It's just it's a government and it's a control structure and it's going to want to get more control. That's what they do.
That's right. And they you never ever see on the media them presenting the right side. No. And I'll say the right side not as being far right.
Yeah.
Or left, but they never give it a fair hearing.
No,
all of the ones who are so against guns and all that they give that 90%, 95% of the media time, and they give the other side.
Yeah,
and Alberta does not have the most guns.
No,
per person.
No,
or per. I think the guns are a ratio of 1 to 4.
Yeah,
in Alberta, Ontario's got a higher per capita than that. So there's a lot of stuff there, and I just done a little bit of looking at it when I realized that when you guys talk about guns and that, and I just wanted to get that point in that the biggest key for me was 1934 handgun registration and fear of the state.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize that, right? They think gun control is something that's new and we're regulating against some new threat that's out there. And then in Canada, that's never really been the case.
When I bought my pistol in 1972, I had it lined up. I knew what it was going to be. Mm-hmm. I had to go down to the RCMP with the information from the store, serial number, all that sort of stuff. And they said, "What do you want a gun for?" I said, "I'd like to target shoot." So they give me the permit. Then I went and picked up my gun, and the permit was to take my gun to Red Earth.
Yep.
And that sort of stuff. And so the laws were in place for a long time. And actually in high level, I'd get a permit to take it to the shooting range at Hinton. And I was at the desk and getting the permit.
Yeah,
the carry
it's a bit
permit.
of a trek.
Yeah, well, I was living in Foothill Lake at the time. So
okay.
I went to the high level RCMP office and I said, "I want this." And the sergeant was sitting in the background and the guy, the young guy at the front was kind of giving me a bit of the gears. I said, "Do you have your FAC?" Mm-hmm. He looks at me and said, "Do you have an FAC?" The law says you require an FAC to have that gun on your hip. Well, there's legislation protecting for that. So
which there is.
Which there is, but I mean, I had a thing. And anyhow, the sergeant's over here and he said, "Give the guy the permit for the year." He said, "Otherwise you'll be in here every second week wanting that, won't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Give it to him for a year." So I had it for a year to go take the gun to Hinton. Yeah. But, so anyhow.
Well, all kinds of rules that the people we're trying to control don't follow anyway. So
that's a fact.
That's unfortunate. So again, thank you so much for coming on. And,
appreciate you coming on.
And to wrap up.
Yeah, so we are on Spotify, YouTube, and now on Apple Podcasts. So you can find us on there. And then, of course, social media, we are on Instagram and on X.
Yeah, and absolutely it helps to like, subscribe, and leave comments. And we'll definitely include some links to some of the forestry stuff and the place that you volunteer there, the Nature Society. That sounds awesome.
Nature Center, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have all
people
that
can
in
check that out. That sounds great.
And the only caveat it has about the forestry stuff is I retired in 2008. So certainly some people...
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
certainly some
I'll
people-
tell you what, I've learned more in this conversation than I did from most of the access to media and stuff over the last few years. So
Yeah.
hopefully
Well,
a lot of other people find
what
the
I
same
found
way.
out, people want to be told the truth. Just tell them what it is.
Yeah.
And be upfront with them.
Yeah.
And that's
don't
what
try
they-
and tax us for it.
Yeah.
No, thank you so
Oh,
much.
you bet.
And this is the Gray Range Podcast. Out.